Silver Flash. Prologue. A young man about the age of 18 ran through the forest as fast as he could. He has been missing since that fateful day that Sasuke thought he had killed him. Kakashi never found him, and Jiraiya never went searching for him. Something changed that day. The day that Sasuke ran his Chidori through his chest, all his ties to Konoha had broken. That day he noticed the only reason he had gone after Sasuke was because Sakura has begged him to, crying in front of him, begging for him to bring Sasuke back for her. He had wondered if it had been the other way around, would she beg Sasuke to go find him and bring him back, or would she just forget he was even ever there? That didn't matter now. 4 years had passed since then, and he wasn't worried about that. No one would recognize him now. He wasn't the #1 most hyperactive ninja anymore. He hadn't been for a long time. Now he was known as the Silver Flash. No one knew his name. No one treated him like a monster, and no one treated him any different because he was the container of the nine-tailed Yoma. If the past 4 years taught him anything, it was to never trust anyone and never let your guard down, even with your friends. In the past 4 years, he had trained all over all the continents. He learned new tricks, both as a jokester and as a ninja. His appearance had also changed. His hair now covered most of his eyes, as well as part of his face, and it was still very much bright blonde, which would be a clue to who he was. Another would be his sky blue eyes, which only would be seen very rarely. His cloths had changed. Orange was now no longer his favorite color. His cloths now resembled that of Akatsuki, but complete black. His underneath cloths resembled an ANBU's attire. Though to him it didn't really matter, he was now on his way back to the place that hated him so much for only one thing. After all these years, he still cared about the village despite the fact that they never found this body and never sent a team to search for him. Only years later did he find out that in the Ninja Bingo book he was classified as a misnin, but was presumed to be dead, so no one ever went searching for him. He smirked at the fact that when he reached the gate, only 2 guards were on post. "Hold it right there," said one of the guards. "State your purpose," the other said. He looked at them and smiled. "Friendly visit. Just passing through," he said. He seemed rather harmless. The guard at the post checked his chakra level, and it was just as low as a villager. "Where are you from?" "Nowhere. I have no village I belong to. Now let me through. I'm only here for a visit," he said again, starting to get rather annoyed moments later inside the village. People could hear screaming from one of the gates. By the time ENBU reached them, the 2 guards posted at the gate were unconscious. "Genjutsu," one ANBU with a wolf's mask asked, looking at his team. One of the guards had begun to wake up as he held his head. "What happened here?" "A man. Arg. I can't remember his face," the guard said, really disoriented. "All right. Take them in for further investigation. I want all gates with an ANBU team," said the wolf-masked ANBU. "The intruder that got into the village must be found and brought to the Hokage's office," he said, sounding rather pissed off. End. Chapter 1. Recap. "A man. Arg. I can't remember his face," the guard said, really disoriented. "All right. Take them in for further investigation. I want all gates with an ANBU team," said the wolf-masked ANBU. "The intruder that got into the village must be found and brought to the Hokage's office," he said, sounding rather pissed off. End of recap. The man that had entered Konoha was now walking quietly through the village as if nothing had gone wrong at the gate. He had teleported near the center of the village, knowing full well that they would be searching for the intruder starting at the gate inwards. He smirked slightly as he knew that no one would recognize him due to his appearance having changed so much in the last few years. His hair was being held up by a black band as it had grown quite a large sum. He didn't really see a point in cutting it anymore. He watched the villagers as he passed by them. No one seemed to recognize him. No one seemed to be giving him hatred looks like as when he was a child, but now all the females, young and old, watched him and blushed. He was now a grown-up. He no longer had the baby fat on his face anymore. Though you couldn't see his body, you could tell that he worked out for it. Only moments had passed, and he could still sense the ANBU trying to find their intruder. He wasn't an intruder. He was still part of the village. Therefore, he was a villager. Mind you, he had been missing, presumed dead, for over 4 years now. He just smiled and then looked up at the monument, seeing Tsunade's face. It really didn't take her long, he thought to himself as he continued to walk around the village. For now, he would keep low before revealing himself and allowing the ANBU to have a fun game of tag. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he said as another him appeared but quickly transformed into the 14-year-old Naruto. He had gotten much better at his shadow replicas. It would take quite a lot to make his disappear. It no longer took one hit. You know what to do, he said as his younger self nodded before disappearing in front of him. He walked for most of the day, only to later find himself at his favorite ramen shack when he was a child. One spicy hot ramen. And make it quick, he said, having a grin on his face in a way hoping that the owner would recognize him. But only a few minutes later, his ramen came with a "Here you go. Hope you enjoy it" greeting. Sighing slightly, he heard villagers just outside the shack talking about how Sasuke had returned after much persistence. "Oh yeah, and did you hear? He came back willingly," one older villager said. "I heard that the elders are just going to give him a break, put him on probation, or something like it," another said. One of the younger villagers, who happened to be female, smiled. "I'm really glad. He's so he's so powerful. We don't want him getting away," she said, correcting herself. "Whatever happened to that kid? You know, the one. What was his name?" the old villager said. They heard a shatter behind them. As they looked back, they could see a blond boy sitting down eating, but he had crushed his glass in his hand. "Oh my gosh, are you all right?" the young girl asked. "Huh. Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry, it didn't break my skin," he said, showing them his hand cheerfully. Small things like this didn't hurt him anymore. Well, it really did. He had just got a handle on how to use his healing powers more. When he had been a child, he hadn't known about his fast healing abilities until sometime later, but once he had a handle on it, he knew when to heal and when to make it look like he was going to die. Though he never let it get to that point. "Oh, I remember his name. It was Naruto. You know, that kid with the 9 tails?" One of the two older ladies said. "Oh yes, good riddance. Nothing good could have come from him still being around," the other older lady said. "And if he was still around?" the mysterious man asked as they just looked at him in shock. "Oh, dear boy, don't joke about such things." Just as the old lady said, as if it was planned, young Naruto ran with a bucket of paint and laughing while being chased somewhat by Anbu. The young man was making sure he held back his laughter as the look on the old bag's faces was utter shock. But they had nothing to say, as just that moment a squad of ANBU, the same one that had appeared at the gate, appeared in front of the shack. "Did you see where that intruder went?" they asked as they looked at Naruto, putting no mind to him. Well, of course they didn't. To them, he looked like an old man. "Oh, I think he went that way," he said, pointed the direction the Naruto copy went. How come they didn't realize he was the intruder? Well, when he had put a genjutsu on the guards posted at the gate, it worked in such a way that whoever was to find them would go under the jutsu as well. It had been a very well thought out plan, which was why he wasn't worried too much about being found right away, only until they realized that they were under. The squad leader nodded and instructed his squad to go after the boy. "Do not worry, ladies. He is an intruder that has taken on the appearance of the 9-tailed container," he told them as the old man nodded. "I see," he said. "So there could be no way that that boy is really him?" he asked, looking at the Yanbu curiously. Even though he couldn't see his face, you could tell that the question shocked the ninja. "No, his body was never found. Jiraiya was instructed not to search for him because the boy was a lost cause. He did anyway," the squad captain said, looking at the old man in front of him. "He returned a year and a half later saying that he never found any traces of the boy," he continued. "So Ero Sanin did go searching for me after all." He thought to himself, but why did he stop after a year? He asked himself, wondering that fact. There must have been a reason as to why the old fart would stop searching. He was going to have to find out why. Not that it really mattered to him. He was just curious. The ANBU was about to leave when Sakura and Sasuke walked by. "Sakura-san, Sasuke-san." There was a long pause before the ANBU started speaking again. "We have an intruder inside of Konoha. We need every available ninja to assist. The intruder is using Hinge no Jutsu," he said before getting rudely interrupted. It seems Sasuke hadn't changed very much, and ANBU is asking for help from us. He said monotone before the ANBU was about to lose his cool. He was probably one of the few that thought of Sasuke as a traitor to the village. The young/old man stepped in and smiled. No need to be rude. He's only asking for your help to find your long-lost friend, he said before starting to walk off. Besides, I told the ANBU I saw the boy running that way with a bucket of paint. The person said, smirking evilly, wonder what he could have done. He continued before looking up at the monument and staring in shock. It seems I see what he's done, he said out loud, pointing to the rocks. That, the ANBU said, rather pissed off. Anyway, you should start searching. By now, he's probably done Kagabunshin and made more of himself, he said looking back at the group as the wind blew, making the hair that was covering his eyes reveal the man's blood-red eyes as he just smiled at them. Besides, what would a traitor want to find the person he ran his Chidori through his chest for, he said still calmly before young Naruto appeared beside the man. Oh, there you are. Had your fun? He asked as his younger double just nodded before the henge was dispelled before them, revealing a clone smiling just as wildly as the real one. I guess it's time to remove that genjutsu I placed on you earlier, the young man said, as the ANBU seemed confused for a moment and then saw that the old man was the intruder that the guard had talked about. Well, sort of. They only seemed to remember that he had really golden hair, that when you looked at him, he resembled a flash of light. By the way, you might want to think about upping the guards at the post during the time of day. You never know who will just walk in. He said, no, you can't be the ANBU said. Like I said before, what would happen if Naruto never died? He asked again, this time pulling the cloak off this body, revealing his black assassin attire. Though he might not have been an assassin, he found that it was really easy to move in. You could now see his face better, allowing everyone in the area to see his 6 whiskers and more like an evil smirk on his face. Naruto, Sakura shouted in shock. But, I thought you died, she said. You sure you did? All you seemed to care about was bringing Sasuke team back. Seems like you succeeded, he told them. Sasuke was shocked to say the least. He had thought that he had killed his former friend. You're lucky you're still alive, Sasuke, Naruto said looking at him. If I had aimed a little lower, like you did, and not at your shoulder, you would be, he said, still smirking at them, as if he found all of this amusing. Naruto, you shouldn't say such things. We're all friends, she said as Naruto seemed to cut her off. I'm sorry if I seem rude, but can it? Friends? What friends? He asked looking at them. By now, 2 ENBU squads were around watching, making sure that he didn't try anything funny. You know, you should really call more people, he said smiling. I'm not Naruto anymore, he said smirking. I'm not that kid you try to kill, he said as Sasuke, who was getting angrier by the second. You could hear Chidori in the background and the bright light that came from it. Only moments later, Sasuke had charged for Naruto. It was true Sasuke was not a lot stronger, but Naruto had learned newer and better things that would help him in his everyday life. You could say that he had learned to be a jack of all trades. Naruto just smirked as he watched Sasuke run at him with Chidori full charge. Naruto, get off of the way, Sakura shouted in fear, not wanting to lose her friend again, for real this time. Don't you have anything new? Add a little spice to your life. Geez, Naruto said looking at Sasuke, who was now very close for comfort. Sharingan was active. You could see full well he still very much relied on it. Let me show you something new, Naruto said as he did a Kage Bunshin, smirking as the Bunshin ran straight towards Sasuke, full force. Sasuke's Sharingan could barely see him. What? He's got much faster, he thought before his eyes widened when there was a big blast. Had his Chidori made contact with the clone? He wondered, not knowing. This isn't new. It's your favorite move, he said as the dust had engulfed them. As the smoke started to clear, you could see the clone still there, cloths only slightly ripped, but not by much as the wound that it received was healing. Sasuke looked at him with a Sharingan, not really seeing the difference between them, as he had once been able to. You came at me yourself, he said as the dust cleared, fully revealing another person standing behind Sasuke, with Rasengan in one hand. You could see the cloak just floated on the wind as it hit the ground. The Naruto, standing in front of Sasuke, the one that had taken the hit, disappeared in a puff of smoke. He wasn't real. Naruto whispered in Sasuke's ear, smirking, Rasengan. He shouted as Sasuke hadn't even sensed it behind him. Sakura watched in shock. She couldn't believe that Naruto was about to hit Sasuke with that attack. Naruto just smirked as he moved his hand toward Sasuke, but instead slammed it against the ground, making a giant dust cloud and wrecking most of the ground. By the time the dust had cleared, Naruto had vanished again, but he was close enough to watch them closely. Sasuke, Sasuke? She shouted, trying to find him, as you could hear some groaned in pain as he got up. The ANBU squad couldn't really make up what had just happened. They were usually elite in tracking and hunting down individuals, but in this case, they couldn't seem to get a good track on Naruto's chakra signature at all. He missed on purpose, Sasuke said as he got up slowly, but something was different. I couldn't tell the fake one apart from the real one, even with my Sharingan, he said. Sakura looked at him as she tried to help him up, but he just seemed to refuse. Did you see him when he was behind you? His Rasengan. It was different. It wasn't blue anymore, it was completely red. And his hair color, she said. It was silver. The ENBU captain looked at them as he walked over to them, and then looked at the hole in the ground, which seemed to be a good 7 feet down. I also believe that he held his power back. Naruto was now staring up at the Hokage Tower. His hair was now silver. Sakura had been right. His hair had changed from golden as the sun to silver. Usually he would just hinge his hair to stay yellow so that he wouldn't attract much attention, but now what did he need to? He needed to let the villagers know that Uzumaki Naruto was back. Probably not for life, but for a while. He smirked slightly as he looked back at the rock monument, looking at what his clone had done, and then smiled. That's a good way to introduce that I'm back, he said, laughing slightly at what it said. The QB is back. You did in? Hey, wow. I kinda didn't really think that I would get good reviews for my story. I probably mentioned the fact that I wrote the prologue during my break at work. I was kinda scared to actually post it on fan fiction, but if you guys like, I'll make sure to continue writing it. Even my friend, who's my beta reader, loves it. He freaked out when I said that I was going to stop where I was, though I was referring to the fact that I was going to leave chapter 1 on a cliffhanger. He thought I was referring to my prologue, just to leave it and not even finish the story at all. Anyway, on with the story. You don't need me ranting one. Aitabai. I would like to thank Empty Head for being such a funny idea. I'll probably be using it for a later chapter. But you're awesome for such idea. Thanks a bunch. When I use your idea, I'll reference it, seeing as it wasn't my idea, but yours. XD. This is not the edited version. I just feel bad not posting it when it's done, and I can't get my editor to fix it until I actually get a hold of him. So if you would like to wait, go ahead. If not, read on. Disclaimer, I don't know Naruto. Only the random things he does XD. Chapter 2. Recap. He smirked slightly as he looked back at the rock monument, looking at what his clone had done, and then smiled. That's a good way to introduce that I'm back, he said, laughing slightly at what it said. The QB is back. When? End of recap. News quickly spread that Naruto had reappeared out of the blue, but no one seemed to be able to find him. Not even Kiba and Akamaru and their noses combined found anything. What the hell? Did he remove his scent? Kiba said as he smelled the area, but was only able to pick up Sasuke, Sakura's, and the ANBU squad captain. There is definitely something wrong, though. He mentioned, the scent that's here is really mixed. I can sense it's in here, but it's so mixed I can't get a track on it, he said as he looked at Akamaru, who had grown in size, as he shook his head as well. Sakura, are you sure it was him? It could have been anyone using a hinge, he said as he pet Akamaru. It was him. Only he knows how to use Rasengan other than Jiraiya and the fourth, Sasuke said, pissed off as he held his arm. It was defiantly him. Sakura said, it was only for a second, but you could feel it was him. She told Kiba, who just gave her a glad. If Naruto was alive, then he would be very happy, but he couldn't smell him at all. And he had become one of the best in his clan, Inukera. He sighed slightly. He's ever the walking dead. Or he's figured out a way to cover his scent, which would explain a lot, Kiba said as he looked at the hole in the ground. Well, if Naruto is back, then I thinks it's great, he said, smirking. Life was getting so boring here without him to pop out of nowhere, and say here I am, Databeo, he said, starting to laugh slightly. Though, I guess that's what he kind of did, popping in and out of existence. He told them as Sasuke just seemed to frown slightly. He was going to find that dobe no matter what it took. Though unknown to them, Naruto was at the Hokage's tower, grinning evilly. What prank should I play on her? He thought for a moment and then started to walk in from the front. Usually the Hokage's building was heavily, but they didn't call him the Silver Flash for nothing. He had forgotten to pick up his cloak for the reason he wanted them to find him, or find out where he's been for the past 4 years. Any moment now he knew that Kiba and Akamaru would find his cloak and smell it. But the only difference was his scent now wasn't Naruto's anymore. It had changed after so many years of travel and a little help from a not-so-well-known ninja. But that would be mentioned later, seeing as everyone would ask him questions. He just grinned. "Oh, Tsunade, BH-on, wonder if you're going to have a heart attack," he said slightly as guards saw the intruder approaching the tower. It was like a scene from an anime, when you see someone walking in the distance with wind blowing their hair to one side, very slowly, with very dramatic instrumental music playing in the background. The guards on post had been only doubled since the intruder was known to enter the village. Everyone would be in such shock, just like Sasuke and Sakura, but that's what he wanted. 3, 2, 1. As if on cue, Kakashi appeared in front of him. "I can't let you go any farther," Kakashi said, not having been informed by anyone yet that the intruder was his former student. "And why is that?" Naruto just asked with a sadistic smile on his face. Kakashi was top of the top. He was what you called elite, though it wasn't known why he had given up being an ANBU to become a Chunin instructor. Naruto just figured that he had probably gotten bored with it. The wind blew lightly again as Kakashi just stared back at his opponent. "You need to give a good reason for that." "I just want to go inside," he said, just smiling. Naruto was fully prepared to battle Kakashi if it came to it. But even though with all his training he still wasn't strong enough, but he wasn't obsessed with power like Sasuke was. His philosophy was that if he was meant to get strong, he would not cheat his way into getting it. It was strange. If Kakashi hadn't been alerted by the sound of a blast, he would have never thought to check the chakra signature. Whoever this intruder was, he was very good at hiding his chakra signature. Yes, you were able to hide your signature, but not fully. And this guy seemed to be able to mask it completely and make whoever was searching for his chakra think that he was just a regular villager. Well, that's what he would have thought had it not been for the assassin's attire the boy was wearing. Just give up, and they might just give you a slap on the wrist and let you leave, Kakashi said, not knowing full well the extent of the boy's power. "Slap on the wrist, check your bingo book," was all Naruto said as Kakashi was suspicious at first. "Don't worry, I won't attack you while you're looking through it," he said as Kakashi nodded and pulled it out to look at it. He didn't see anything different about it. Nothing recent had been added and nothing holds had been taken out. "Right, good. Now turn to page 26 of that," Naruto told him as Kakashi did. On the same page it stated that Uzumaki Naruto was a missing nin, but was presumed dead. "What about Naruto-kun? He disappeared a long time ago," Kakashi said as Naruto smirked. "All right, now look up my appearance in that book," he said. Kakashi just looked oddly at him. "If this is some kind of trick to get me to let you go through, it won't work," he said as he shut the book before even bothering to look at what Naruto said. It was true. The Silver Flash had a very big bounty on his head, and he sided with villages that were known as the underdogs, making them stronger just in case someone decided that it would be fun to mess with him. Due to his multiple alliances with countless villages, his ultra ego had been added into the bingo book as a treat to any Kage from major villages in case he ever showed up. Naruto just sighed. "Fine, don't heed my warning," he said as Kakashi made sure to pay attention to his intruder's every move. Shrugging slightly, Naruto just continued to walk forward, ignoring the fact that Kakashi was standing in front of him. By now, the group that he had left behind near the shack was making their way towards the Hokage to inform her of the new. Kiba's eyes widened when he finally picking up a scent. "Shit, we better get to the tower quick," he said as he couldn't seem to believe that he had finally picked up a scent after an hour or so. They all nodded as Kakashi was about to go attack Naruto, but as he ran towards, he just seemed to pass through his opponent, Shadow Replica. He asked, really confused. "I'm over here." Naruto said, waving his hand from behind Kakashi. Kakashi turned his head slightly to see Naruto standing behind him. "I'm not that kid anymore," he said, referring to what Kakashi had once looked at in the bingo book. "I'm better than what he was," he continued as Kakashi turned fully to face him. "Naruto," Kakashi whispered in shock as he just watched Naruto cautiously. "What, are you surprised that I'm actually still alive?" he asked, looking at Kakashi. "I'm not sure if I should be happy with that look or be pissed," he said, smirking evilly. "I had some help staying alive, but for now you don't need to know how I've been alive for so long without any of your training. Despite the fact that you didn't even care to train me," he said, looking at Kakashi. "Either way, I'm not here for you. I'm here to speak to Tsunade," he said, looking at him as he turned in one spin and then started to walk to the opening of the building. Just as he was going to take his first step into the building, Sasuke appeared in front of him again. "You again," Naruto said, annoyed. "Didn't you learn your lesson back at the ramen shack?" he asked, looking at him as he grabbed Sasuke by the collar and smirked as he pulled him close to his face, pushing his forehead against Sasuke's, allowing him to see his blood-red eyes. "Looks familiar, don't they?" he asked, smirking as you could see the slit that resembled an animal's eye. "If you want a second go at it, I'm sure that my Bunshin would love to fight you," he said as he threw Sasuke aside. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he said as a double of him appeared as he stood there. "I'm actually not going to participate in this fight," he said, looking at Sasuke as his clone took a step forward. "What, are you scared?" Sasuke asked him dully. Naruto just laughed and shook his head. "No, not really. I have better things to do than fight you," he told Sasuke, grinning. It wasn't really that he didn't have the time, he just didn't want to deal with Sasuke's cheating ways at that point in time. His Bunshin seemed to be different than the original, but that was only by Naruto's choice. This Bunshin, unlike the one before, had blue eyes so that you could tell them apart. Seconds later, his Bunshin attacked Sasuke, just like the previous one, but only this time his steps were just going at a regular pace. Sasuke smirked slightly as he had thought he had this one in the bag this time. After fighting for a few moments, Sasuke was breathing hard while the clone just smiled as if this was a workout. Everyone from the shack had finally appeared, watching the battle in a sort of shock as Naruto just leaned against the door waiting for his clone to finish. "I give this battle another 2 minutes," the real Naruto said as his clone seemed to just be enjoying himself only to watch Sasuke try for another Chidori on him. "Nay, Clone-chan," a voice said as everyone looked at where that voice had come from. "Dissipate," was all that could be heard before the clone nodded and disappeared. In the time while Naruto had waited for his clone to win, he had closed his eyes and just lay against the wall. But once his clone disappeared, Sasuke had no target in front of him instead of the real thing. Naruto had opened his eyes when he heard the voice, but it was too late. Sasuke was only a second away. A blast was seen as the group saw the figure sitting on top of a corner building before jumping down in a dust cloud. "Aru!" Naruto shouted, a little angry. "Why the hell did you do that?" Everyone heard as the dust started to disappear around the tower, as they could see Sasuke pull his arm out of the wall. The dust cloud started to get blown away by the wind as two figures could now be seen. One was Naruto, but the other one, they couldn't figure out who it was. End. Naru/Saku. Okay, so it seems that the Naru/OC is winning so far. I had to put one down for my friend who read the story and said she would like to see a Naru/OCFIC. But so the ones in the lead are Naru/Hina, which I've heard most say it's been overdone a lot. Naru/Temari. Naru/OC. I'm sorry, but those are the ones you're going to have to choose from. I can't keep the voting going on much longer. I'm running out of things to write. Not really. Just really want to keep the story going and not drag it out of very long waiting for votes. I'm going to be introducing the OC in this chapter, as well as maybe bring in Temari for a few moments. Disclaimer, do not own Naruto, only the random things he does XD. Unedited Chitair 3. Recap. I give this battle another 2 minutes. The real Naruto said as his clone seemed to just be enjoying himself only to watch Sasuke try for another Chidori on him. "Nay, Clone-chan," a voice said as everyone looked at where that voice had come from. "Dissipate," was all that could be heard before the clone nodded and disappeared. In the time while Naruto had waited for his clone to win, he had closed his eyes and just lay against the wall. But once his clone disappeared, Sasuke had no target in front of him instead of the real thing. Naruto had opened his eyes when he heard the voice, but it was too late. Sasuke was only a second away. A blast was seen as the group saw the figure sitting on top of a corner building before jumping down in a dust cloud. Aru! Naruto shouted, a little angry. Why the hell did you do that? Everyone heard as the dust started to disappear around the tower, as they could see Sasuke pull his arm out of the wall. The dust cloud started to get blown away by the wind as two figures could now be seen. One was Naruto, but the other one, they couldn't figure out who it was. End of recap. You could hear Naruto shouted at the person that was barely standing 3 feet from him. All you could see was the shadow of the new intruder. The dust had started to clear as you could now start to see the figure. They were wearing a similar cloak to what Naruto was wearing. Kiba, his scent? Sakura asked, looking at her Inu training friend. He nodded as he took a sniff of the air and shook his head. I can't smell him either. It's the dust. Just too much of it, he said, hoping there was the reason to his failed smelling senses. The group was now able to see his head. While only slightly, this person seemed to be a lot shorter than Naruto, him now being about 6 feet tall. In the years that had gone by, he had grown to be a long and very hot Naruto, or so some of the villagers thought, even though they didn't know he was the QB container. Either way, the group could now see that the second intruder was no Kage Bunshin like some had thought it was. The person that was standing beside Naruto just punched him slightly. They weren't even taller than his shoulder, the top of their head just barely reached it. As the smoke started to clear, the new intruder turned to face the group before Naruto was about to walk over to Sasuke, but was just being held in place by a glomp on his arm. Sasuke, on the other hand, wasn't very pleased with the fact that instead of hitting Naruto, he had hit the Hokage tower wall. What the hell? He muttered as the person walked over to him. Hey, I gave you a chance to hit him. It just shows you that he's much more stronger than you for now. The female voice said, grinning, just like Naruto had been earlier, though this one was different. It was coming from a 4-inch, 5-inch girl with much longer hair than Naruto's was. She didn't even look like she was Genin. She barely looked 13. Her cloths were completely black as the wind blew some of the cloak out of the way, allowing Sasuke to see that she had a skin-tight outfit underneath that covered both her arms complete all the way down her knuckles. Her hair, much similar in color to Sasuke's black hair, was pulled up high as it covered her face, was being covered much like Naruto's, though the only difference was that her hair was almost down the floor. If Sasuke didn't know any better, it would seem like this girl was copying Naruto's attire. Sadly, it was not the case. She dressed like that for a reason. You used to be friends with this weakling? The girl asked as Sasuke was about to punch her when she grabbed and punched in the palm of her hand. The entire group watched in awe as Naruto just shook his head. Sasuke couldn't believe it. A little girl had stopped his punch with no effort at all. Don't underestimate me just because I'm small, said her voice, which came out in a more sadistic tone, smirking directly at him. Enough, Aru, Naruto muttered dully. Of course that will be enough, said another female voice behind Sasuke, who was down, standing near the Hokage's newly designed door. Aru just stared at the person and smiled as she ran back toward Naruto and stood behind him, popping her head from the side. That girl, something's up with her, Kakashi whispered to the group as they all seemed to nod at his comment. Naruto said, not really scared of her. Finally decided to wake up. He asked disrespectfully, knowing it would piss her off. No one calls me that, she said, rather angry as she clenched her fist and threw a punch at him. Though for some reason Naruto couldn't move as he looked down at Aru for a moment as she smiled at him. This is payback for leaving me in that village, she thought to herself, smirking as Tsunade made contact with the top of Naruto's head, slamming him down directly into the ground. Why didn't he move out of the way? Sakura asked as she watched what was going on. It appears that that little girl was holding him down somehow. A voice from behind Sakura said as she jumped out slightly. Shino, she shouted, not being able to believe that he had actually talked for once other than on a mission. Ichin, when my bugs told me something interesting was happening here, I decided to come see for myself, he said as another figure appeared with a few others. They used to be known as the Rookie Nine because never had it happened that 9 teams had graduated and passed the sensei test so easily. You guys, you're all here, Sakura said in a bit of shock. They were all still very good friends, but since she was Tsunade's assistant, she knew that some of them had been on missions. The word must have spread quick that Naruto was back in town, she had thought as she looked at them all. So where is that silver flash anyway? Shikamaru said, looking around. I heard he's amazing at planning strategies on the stop. He continued as Niji nodded in agreement with him. We all finished our missions eerily when we heard that the Silver Flash had decided to head for Konoha, Chuji said. We got worried that he might try to do something to the village, another voice said, smiling as she walked out from behind the group. Hinata, Sakura shouted, giving her a big hug. I haven't seen you in over 3 months, she stated, looking at her. Yes. It was a very complex mission, she mentioned. Naruto listened in on the conversation as he started to get back up slowly. I'm going to get you for this, Aru, he whispered as she just smiled at him and then jumped him from behind as she was now on his back. Hey, are you shitting me? You telling me that's the Silver Flash? He's got a freaking 12-year-old with him. How bad can he be? Chuji said, starting to laugh slightly. No, Chuji, hold on. Sakura attired to tell him, but was cut off by Kakashi pointing to Naruto, or actually the person on his back whose chakra level was now through the roof. Aru, Naruto said, looking up at her. She didn't like behind called a 12-year-old, even though she looked like one. He tried to grab her before she jumped off of his back and speeded at Chuji. Kakebunsin no Jutsu, Naruto shouted as it appeared right in front of Chuji, who was now just starting at what was going on. As were most of the group, Niji and Hinata had only been able to notice the spike in chakra as they looked at her, seeing that she had much more than her little body could handle. You're lucky, Naruto said, smirking at Chuji, who stood there and shook, still not knowing what had just happened. Naruto's bunshin had taken the hit for Chuji. If it hadn't, Chuji could have been deeply injured. How, you ask? Well, Aru, despite the fact that she was in the boy of a 12-year-old, that was really only a hinge that was really well hidden. No one would be ever able to tell the difference between her hinge. Flashback. Soon after the fight with Sasuke, Naruto had woken up and began walking towards the opposite direction that Sasuke had gone. An inch closer, and he could have killed me, he thought to himself as he groaned in pain. He had only been walking for over an hour, but to him it seemed as if it had been days since the battle with Sasuke. His chest was slowly healing, but it hadn't healed very much since the falls. Sighing slightly, he knew that he had to find a place to rest. He had remembered that on his way towards the falls, he had seen a cave not much farther from where he was. Once he had reached it, he ventured inside in order to stay away from the cold breeze that was following the night. Looking slightly shocked when he saw that there was a light coming from inside the cave, he followed it to find himself inside a laboratory, much like the one he had heard Orochimaru had. Looking over the files that had been scattered on the Gruned, he was able to make out a few words out of them. Test subject 26, reading high levels of aggressive behavior, he said out loud as he looked at another. Note 3, test subject 26 does not seem to want to respond to any treatment. Note 10, 26's aggressive patterns have worsened. Note 50, experiment failure, terminate number 26. Naruto looked through them, but couldn't seem to make ends meet of anything that it said there. Probably had something to do with all the blood he had lost just trying to find the place. He grounded again as he went to look around to make sure that there was no one around. What he found he wasn't expecting at all corpses of people laying around the room, as if someone had massacred them while they were trying to escape. He looked over to see that one of the bodies was laying on top of a very large container that could probably fit a body inside. He moved the corpse out of the way and then opened the container very slowly with his one good arm. His eyes opened wide as he saw a girl covered in a fresh coat of blood from head to toe. Looking back at the corpses and then back at the girl, he couldn't understand how the blood was so fresh, seeing as the corpses were probably about 4 months old and rotting. He screamed in pain moments later as he held his chest tightly before falling to the ground on his knees, groaning in a tremendous bout of pain. Only seconds later, he passed out from the pain to see that the girl inside the container was slowly getting out. The container that was holding the girl had been sealed, but due to the face that the man hadn't had enough time to seal her and died before he could punch in the codes to lock her in there and destroy her body. Her eyes slowly started to open as she looked around, slightly noticed the smell of blood on her body. Moving slowly, she got up, putting her hand on the side of the container, pushing herself up. She couldn't have been much older than Naruto, but there was something completely different about her. As the 4-month-old blood dripped off her body, one could tell that her arms and some of her lower back was covered in complex seals which seemed to suck up the blood. It was rather disgusting to see as she just smirked evilly. She looked down to see that the scientists that she had attacked when they had tried to kill her were all now just corpse. But something was different. There was a body laying there, fresh blood getting on the dusted floor. Tilted her head slightly as she looked at him. "I don't remember him," she said to herself as she turned him over with her foot to see where the blood was coming from. Blinking when she saw it was coming directly from his chest. "He should be dead," she was saying, but stopped in mid-sentence as she saw it slowly healing itself. Kneeling down, she touched his wound as he flinched painfully. Getting up slightly, and then walking over to a cupboard and opening it, she pulled out bandages, and then walking back to him as she cut his vest and shirt off of him, making it easier for her to tend to the wound. Most likely a few days later had passed before Naruto finally woke up. Looking around, he was surprised to see that he was no longer in the lab. Had it all been a dream his mind had made to trick him? Seconds later, the girl he had seen in the container walked in. "You're awake," she said slightly, not really surprised. "I was wondering when you would finally wake up," she told him as she put some good on the counter. "Where are we?" Naruto asked, looking around frantically. "Someone's house," she said blankly with no emotion. Naruto just started back at her. "What do you name?" he asked her at point blank as she just stared back at him. "Number 26, she replied. "What number were you?" she asked back, looking at him, actually seeming interested. "Huh, what are you talking about?" "Number. My name is Uzumaki, Naruto," he told her. She repeated, having a hard time repeating it. You could tell she hadn't talked much in her life. Her vocabulary didn't seem to be very much, only a few words at a time. "I have no name," she replied. "Only what they called me," she told him as she got up. Naruto didn't mean to stare, but when he saw that her whole body was covered in bandages while mostly her arms, tights, and lower part of her torso, he began to question her. "Huh? Why do you have bandages?" he asked her, looking at her. "I hurt people that see them," she replied, looking down slightly. End of flashback. Chuji had been very lucky indeed. The sleeve that had once covered the little girl's arm down to her knuckles down seemed to be holding onto the bunshins trotted as her eyes glowed a deep, deep red along with the markings on her arm. Much like Sasuke's curseal, but only the opposite. These weren't given to her. She was born with them, and even a hinge couldn't cover them. "Aru, clam down." Chuji didn't mean to say you look 12, the bunshin said, as the real Naruto seemed to be preoccupied with trying to hold back Tsunade from storming over to her. He didn't want to make Aru more angry than she already was. No one could tell what she would do, though he could probably Imagine. Aru's eyes widened when she noticed she was holding onto the bunshin and then look as quickly as she had grabbed on. The bunshin started to cough, slightly, holding his neck slightly, as fizzling sounds could be heard as it had quickly started to heal. Her color had now gone back to a light pink as she just began to blink. "Huh, Naruto-chan," she said, looking at him. The clone had really been Naruto. He had done a replace jutsu with his clone, knowing full well that his clone wouldn't be able to handle her strength. "You almost had me that time," Naruto said, smiling as he rubbed the back of his head. Chuji watched on in utter shock, along with all in Rookie 9. The ones that had had their bloodlines already active had watched a few moments. Sasuke has been as well. He was frozen in his spot as he watched the girl in horror triple her chakra level in a matter of seconds. Naruto just started to laugh as she gave him an angry look. "I could have killed you, Baka," she shouted at him as Naruto just continued to laugh, turning around. "Nay, Chuji, good to see you again. Glad to see you haven't changed," he said as everyone just started at him. "Yhhhhh. Naruto," they all shouted at the same time. "That's my name." he said, striking the wind blue again as his Bunshin was still fighting with Tsunade. Well, more like arguing with her. I'm fine, Aru. Really, don't worry about it. I know how you get, he said, smiling at her. Besides, you know I wouldn't be here without you. He whispered to her, grinning as she nodded slightly. So, Kiba, how long did it take you before you found my scent? He asked, looking at Kiba. How looked like he was trying to avoid the question. Hey, well, I can't remember. He started to say, couldn't find you. He finished, neither could we. Shino said as well. Sakura couldn't believe it. Moments ago, he was acting like a sadistic killer, and now he was acting all friendly. Sasuke had finally appeared beside her as he watched what was going on. They all were accepting him back into the circle, though how much Naruto let them see was up to him. Sasuke did notice something different. Naruto no longer had blood-red eyes, but they had gone back to sky blue. He smiled like the old Naruto and laughed like the young Naruto. Something was differently wrong with this picture, but if he tired to confront him now, that little girl would attack him, that he was likely sure of. He stood there quietly as Naruto seemed to jump away from the group. I'm sorry, but you may think I'm back here for you. But I'm not, he said, looking at him with a slight grin on his face. You all ditched me long ago. I have no connect to you anymore, he said as his red eyes seemed to return. Naruto, Tsunade said as she had his clone in a headlock. You seem to be relying on the Kyuubi's powers, she said, looking at him as he smirked. Actually, Honorable Hokage. Sorry to disappoint you, he told her, smirking. I'm not. I've made no deal with the Kyuubi to use his powers. He told him, I'm using my own power. The changes you see are all natural. With a little help from a good friend of mine, he said as Arun nodded her head slightly as she jumped on his back again. Naruto gave her a smirking grin. I'm only here on business, he told her, and then various people got in the way. He told her, looking at Sasuke, who still had his Sharingan powered up. What business could you want with Konoha? She asked, giving him a strange look. From what she had gathered, this wasn't the same Naruto anymore. Something had changed him completely while he was gone. And this girl. There was something strange about her as well, but she couldn't seem to put her finger on it. Naruto-chan, Aru whispered to Naruto as her body was trembling slightly. After so many years, the seals that were on her body had begun to grow once again. It had only happened once while he had been with her, but she had told Naruto that it happened 4 times previous to that when she had been in the lab. She never really told him the extent of what it did to her body, but it was one of the reasons why she hid her body under a hinge most of the time. Only Naruto now knew her real form. I'm here because I need you to look at Aru, he said, looking at Tsunade seriously. And if I refuse? She asked back, not even thinking about her answer. Then I will destroy Konoha off the map. End. I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. Again, this is the unedited version, just like chapter 2, but I did send the second chapter along with this one to him, so I should get them back at one point today/tomorrow. I really liked writing this chapter, but the flashback was hard a bit because I didn't know what to write for it. It all just came to me. Either way, I hope you like the OC character I added. She actually very cool. Well, maybe only to me, probably only to me. She more sadistic than Naruto, but has a more serious attitude than him. I really hope everyone enjoys it, cause I still don't know which pairings it's going to be. I've chosen the 3 with the most hits. They are Naru/Hina, 6. Narutemi, Sai. Naur/OC, 6. Those are the 3 you guys have to choose from. I just don't think I could be able to do a Naru/Harem on my first fix. Maybe in later ones, I promise. XD. Anyway, please review and let me know what you think. It always helps in letting me know what you guys want from my story. Anyway, I'm off. I don't seem like I have enough time to sleep before I have to wake up again. Only 2 hours. Guess I'll just go shower and watch a movie. Just check back in a few days, or actually the same day. I'll probably have both edited versions of Chapter 2 and 3. I just feel bad making you guys wait for the next chapter. Enjoy the chapter. Unedited Chapter 4. Recap. And if I refuse? She asked back, not even thinking about her answer. Then I will destroy Konoha off the map. End of recap. You wouldn't be able to destroy all of us, Sasuke said as he gave Naruto a glare. Naruto just looked at him and smirked. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. Aru said as she turned her head to look at Sasuke. Though it didn't look like it, to Sasuke you could tell all she saw was hatred. For what he had no idea, but he knew hatred he still had a large sum of him still currently building inside of him. He just turned his head slightly as if not hearing what she said, but he could still feel her evil glare on him. Tsunade had let out a small sigh. He was serious. Why would he hate the village so much when he had returned after so many years? Naruto, I want to speak to you privately. Tsunade said, looking at Aru, whose deathly grip on Naruto's shirt released slightly as she jumped down. He gave her a slight look and then asked if she would be fine as she just nodded. He could see her arm trembling. He had to make sure that whatever Tsunade wanted, he would have to make it quick. It would be very soon before she couldn't control her temper like the last time. Sighing slightly as he started to remember. Flashback. It had been about 6 months now after he had met 26. Even after so long, she didn't really talk to him. Just follow behind him as he led the way. You know, you can just walk beside me, he said, stopping for a moment and looking at her. I like it, she said, looking at him, giving him her first smile. He was completely confused. She seemed to do that a lot in the 6 months he had been with her. She would just say something really random and then go quiet, but this time it was different. She opened her mouth again to say something else, but then closed it right back. Guess she's not much of a talker. Naruto said. Ano, I'm getting hungry. What about you? He asked, looking at her. Her appearance had been a bit different then. Her hair was short like a boy's, and she didn't seem to have bandages that wrapped around her arms. Sighing slightly after he got no reply from her, he started to walk again. Come on, we'd better get to the next village, he said, starting to walk again, but was immediately as he saw something run by and skid to a stop about 30 feet away from him. A black light. Naruto said, rather confused as he looked in front of him to see 26 standing there waiting for him. You're slow. Hurry up, she said. He just looked at her. He had no idea she was able to do that. Wait, what was that? He said, still very much confused as he ran up to her. Better yet, did you do that? He asked her again. You said you were hungry. She told him. Don't you want something to eat? Yeah, but how is that going to help? He asked as he looked at her, still shocked. We would there in a matter of minutes, she told him, looking at him blankly. Huh, they never taught you how to do this, she asked as she got ready to show him the hand seals. Once you get really good at it, you won't even need to use hand seals. It's just one seal and you're off, she said, giving him her very first smile. It was odd. She only seemed to show him the seals once or twice before he got it down packed. Oh, I forgot to mention, it doesn't even use that much chakra, only a little, but your chakra is a lot different than mine, she said, looking away. Naruto smirked and then gave her a thumbs up. That's because I'm a demon, he said, and then pausing for a moment. Or so that's what everyone call me, he finished as she looked back at him. I'm just a monster, she replied. Naruto just looked at her, but didn't really ask more than that. YOSH. Let's try this out, he shouted as he did the hand seals, but did one incorrectly and ended up disappearing like she had, but slamming into a tree hard. Next thing you heard was someone laughing. Slowly getting up, Naruto looked back to see her laughing at him as he held his nose slightly. You think this is funny? He asked her as she just appeared in front of him in the black flash once again. I think so, she said, giggling some more. She didn't know why, but her whole life she had never once laughed or talked too much before. She found it odd. She could have easily killed him back at the lab, but she chose not to, though. Instead, she saved his life, and now she was teaching him her jutsus. What did I do wrong? I'm sure I did all the seals right, he whined as she just continued to laugh at him. You did this one wrong, she told him as she showed him the seal. With this jutsu, all the seals had to be done correctly, seeing as it navigated you instead of you running. If one was done incorrectly, you would slam into something or fly towards it. Either way, it was a painful experience. Naruto tried for pretty much the whole day only to slam and fly in all sorts of directions, though they were getting closer to the village every time, but it wasn't as fast as it should have been. Only a few months later, Naruto had finally perfected that technique, as well as a few others that 26 had wanted to teach him. Aren't you tired of being called a number? Naruto asked her as she fixed her cloths as she had gotten up. Yeah, a number? She asked. 26 is a number. When I was in that lab, I read that you were the 26th candidate for the project. He told her as she just looked at him boredly. I never had names, she told him. I was born there, so I was just given 26. I didn't know what it meant or anything, she said. Well then, I think. You look like an Aru, he told her, smiling and giving her a thumbs up. Defiantly an Aru. He continued as she just shrugged. If that's what you want to call me, I really don't care. She told him. Though she was actually happy he gave her a name, she really liked it. Later that day, once they had finished getting supplies for the road, seeing as they could never stay in the same place for too long, some men had grabbed Aru by the shoulder and pulled her back. Ah, there you are, 26. We've been looking for you, the man said as she just stared at him in shock. Naruto had been on the other side of town, seeing as he told her it would be a good idea to split up and gather everything they needed much faster. Fair kill. She couldn't even get out the words as she looked at the man. It was true he should have been dead, but he had managed to get out of the lab just in time to get to the nearest village and get help. How did you get out? He asked her, smirking evilly at her as he licked his lips and then pulled out a kunai and circling it on his finger. Let's see how those seals are doing, he said as he grabbed the kunai and then slashed it down her sleeve, not caring if he cut her at all. The people around the marketplace started in shock before running away from the group of men. Aru screamed in pain as she jumped back and held her arms slightly, just looking at his evil smirk. Ah, I see they've gotten more pronounced. Must have been from Kill the Scientist, he said, laughing slightly. You know what blood does to you, he told her as her seal began to suck up her own blood as it healed the wound as well. Her eyes got droll as she lowered her head slightly as she just began to smile sadistically at him. The slash where her arm had been now grew a large red seal all the way along where it had been cut. Her head soon lifted as you could see the red glow between her hairs. Oh, I love it when you get like this, he told her, smirking as she appeared behind him, trying to punch him from behind. I don't think so, little one, said another voice that had appeared in front other, catching her fist before it made contact with the man. Phew, I thought you weren't going to show Nakatsu-sama, said the man, as Nakatsu just laughed, holding her fist, but then grabbing her arm as to look at the seal. Wonderful, he said, looking at her as she tried to pull her arm away. Naruto, on the other hand, had absolutely no idea about what was going on until he heard a loud, destructive sound coming from the area he was rooming with Aru. Stupid village having to be so big, he said as he ran as fast as he could back to her. Then, remembering the technique Aru had taught him a few months back, he crossed his fingers. Let this work, he said to himself, perfectly executing the hand seals as he disappeared in a yellow flash before appearing in front of the hotel and seeing that most of Aru's cloths had been ripped off her. Only a shirt remained and shorts as her body was covered in her own blood. He could see the cuts all along her body. Ryu, he shouted as she didn't seem to hear him. Nakatsu smirked. Oh, look over there, 26. He said as he pointed, but she didn't even look. Naruto was about to run after her to stop her, but what he saw next made him stay in his tracks. The blood along Aru's body was now being sucked in her seals, as they were now all visible due to the little cloths she was now wearing. But that wasn't what shocked him. The seals had begun to grow. The little tattoo-type seal around her waist had now extended its way up her arm, just a little bit past her elbow, while the one on her lower back grew down the side of their tights. Aru, Naruto said softly as he watched her breathing heavily before Nakatsu started to laugh. Oh, boy. Yes, don't you know what she is? He asked Naruto as he stared at Nakatsu confused. She adores blood. Well, maybe only when she's like this, he told Naruto. She's a monster, somewhat like the tailed demons that are around, he continued, but completely different. She can't control herself when she's like this. He started to laugh. She could very well be more powerful than the nine-tailed Kyuubi. We'll have to see, Nakatsu said as Naruto was getting angrier by the second. It had taken him 6 months to finally befriend Aru, and now she was going crazy just because of this guy. He wouldn't let that happen. Aru, Naruto shouted again as Nakatsu continued to laugh. She won't respond to that name. She probably doesn't even know you exist, he said as Aru turned her head slightly towards Naruto, grinning sadistically. Look what you've done. You've pre-voiced her. Now she'll just come after you. Which I don't mind. He said, not noticing that Naruto's eyes had already become animal-like. Aru slowly turned her body to face Naruto as she clenched her fist as she ran towards him to hit him, but Naruto caught her fist and then grabbed her waist as he flipped her to the ground. He didn't want to hurt her, so he had to find a way to make her stop. Aru, stop! He shouted at her, fang fully grown as the red chakra started to appear. Nakatsu stopped laughing when he noticed an increase in chakra coming from the boy. Interesting. He thought to himself he wasn't a test subject in the lab. He tired to recall as Aru stopped fighting back and just stared straight up at him. Nah, she said slightly no, looking at him as her eyes began to go back to their natural color. What? That's impossible. Nakatsu shouted as he couldn't believe 26 had actually responded to the boy. Did I hurt someone? She asked, looking up at Naruto, who just smiled no. He told her, holding back a flinch, so she wouldn't notice that she actually had managed to dig her other fist into his side, clawing at his side slightly. Interesting, Nakatsu said to himself as he walked over to them slightly, but made sure to keep his distance. It seems you found a play date, 26. He told them as he disappeared. I'll make sure to keep an eye on you. His voice said as it could be heard. Naruto smiled at her as he slowly got up, making sure to hold his side, so she wouldn't see the blood, though it was a little too late as she looked at her hand to see that the blood was being sucked up into her wrist. Moving back slightly, she stared at her as she tired to make the blood stop. Aru, what are those? Naruto asked as he could see that she was being really frantic about the matter. Nothing, she snapped at him as she turned her back to him, not wanting to face him. They make me a monster, she said with her back turned to him, allowing him to see the tattoo like markings on her lower back. Aru, seriously, you're not a monster. They just told you are, but you're not, he told her as he walked over to her slightly and then put his orange coat over her and then picked her up in one swoop. Guess we better get you some new cloths, because these won't do anymore. He told her, smiling as she just looked at him and shook. Hee, don't worry. I'm the same as you. Let's stick together, okay? He said, looking at her, just smiling. I'll protect you. I'm gonna make sure no one hurts you anymore. Or I'll kill them, he said, smirking as she just continued to look at him in shock. No one had ever said they would be her friend before. What was so different now? She wanted to know. Naruto carried her back to their room and then started to rummage through a whole bunch of stuff to try to find her some cloths, but had no luck. Naruto, she said with a long pause as he looked at her, waiting for her to continue. Thank you. And a flashback. Naruto looked back at Aru as she stood in the middle of the crowd of ANBU, along with his former friends. Aru, I'll be back soon. Don't hurt anyone, he said, waving at her as she nodded at him. I'll meet you there, she said back as he just turned and waved, letting her know he knew what she meant. You're not going anywhere until Uzumaki returns, the ANBU captain said as she just gave him a smirk. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, she said as 4 clones appeared and ran in different directions. Split up. Find her, the ENBU captain said as the Rookie 9 looked at Niji and Hinata as they had their Bakugia fully active to see in which direction she went. I'll go this way and take the first clone, Niji said as Tenten and Rock Lee joined him, right? Shikun Ino, Chuji, you go this way, Niji said, showing them where to go as Hinata looked at her old Jin and teammates. We're going this way, she said as Shino and Kiba both nodded. Over the past 4 years, Hinata had learned to be stronger and make her own path for herself despite the wishes of her father. Sasuke looked at him, but without a word disappeared in a poof of smoke. I guess he's gone for the last clone, Kiba said as he looked at Sakura, who just looked pissed off. Sakura, come with us. We could use your strength, Ino said as she nodded and followed. The teams were off in a matter of seconds, while Naruto was now in Tsunade's office. He stood there in front of her desk as she sat down. Naruto, where have you been for the past 4 years? She shouted at him. You know how worried I was about you when we couldn't find your body, she continued to shout off the top of her lungs. Naruto just looked at her blankly. Nay, Bachan, he said, looking at her with an evil smirk. I wasn't kidding when I said if you didn't help Aru, I would destroy the village. he said, looking at her. Tsunade just sighed. I figured you had something up your sleeve, she replied as he seemed like he wasn't paying attention. Naruto, I will help you. As long as you back, she begged him. She was going to help his friend either way. Naruto was like a son to her, and she didn't want to lose him again. What is wrong with her? She asked as Naruto looked back at her. Nothing, he said as she just looked at him confused. Basically, she's healthier than me. He continued, did you see those markings on her hand and wrist? He asked, looking at Tsunade, who just nodded. It seems like they've gotten worse over the past year. But she hasn't killed anyone, he added, softly looking away. Naruto, what are you getting at? Tsunade asked, looking at him, seeing that his once tough exterior had started to crumble as he spoke about Aru. She's getting worse. They're all over her body, he said softly before snapping out of it, and then looking back at Tsunade with a serious look. If she doesn't get them fixed, he'll come back for her, he told her. At this point, Tsunade was completely confused, as I'm sure the readers are. Because I know I am. I'll be back with Aru in the morning, Naruto said, disappearing. Naruto, wait. Tsunade shouted as he had disappeared before he could hear her. Markings, Tsunade thought as she started to go through certain books to find markings that resembled the ones on the young girl's wrists. The clones seemed to be doing their job of making everyone run on a wild goose chase, though it seemed that Sasuke was slowly getting fed up with chasing after her, if it really was her. Moments later, Aru seemed to stop. She fell to the ground, holding her body tightly as she started to scream. Sasuke hid his chakra well enough for her not to notice, but she seemed preoccupied with something else at that moment in time. Seconds later, she had punched the ground with sheer force as she seemed to destroy the ground, making a giant dust cloud wrap around her. I guess I follow the real one, Sasuke thought as he saw that the dust was slowly disappearing. He watched as it disappeared, only to stare in shock. Wow. In a chapter 4, hello. I'm back for another chapter of Silver Flash. I hope that everyone is enjoying all the chapters so far. I've had questions if Aru is really the QB. No, she's not. QB is still very much in Naruto. He'll show up soon. I don't want to spoil the plan I have for him. So SHHHSSS. XD. Anyway, OMG, I read over chapter 4, and I feel so bad. There are so many spelling and grammar mistakes that even I was like, WTF was I smoking when I typed this out? Mind you, I don't smoke, but still, I'm extremely sorry about that. I'm going to make sure that my beta edits the new chapter along with the others very soon, or I shall hunt him down and hurt him. XD. Either way, I really hope that you are enjoying Silver Flash, and I'm sorry about the delay in chapters. It just seems that my workload has begun to pile up without me noticing. That's what happens when you take architectural technology, XD. It's mostly drawing, though, so I should hopefully get this chapter out sooner than chapter 4. I kind of put that chapter off, only a little. OMG. I'm sorry. I know this is a really late update, but I can't help it. Stupid building materials teacher is failing me for no reason. So I got angry at him and sent him a very polite email, and he replied back with a really rude answer. So stupid. He's just a prick. It's not even funny. Anyway, on with the story. On with chapter 5. Not that anyone read this anyway. Disclaimer. I don't know Naruto, only the odd things he does. Unedited chapter 5. Recap. I guess I followed the real one. Sasuke thought as he saw that the smoke was slowly disappearing. He watched as it disappeared, only to stare in shock. What? End of recap. Sasuke just watched as the smoke began to clear. He couldn't believe what he saw. The little girl that had once been lying on the ground in pain wasn't there anymore. It was a hinge the whole time, he thought as he watched the girl stand up. Her cloths had now changed. They were no longer the thigh spandex-like outfit that resembled Rock Lee's outfit. As she was getting up, you could see the flow of the combat-style kimono ran all the way to the ground, hiding her entire body from sight. The sleeves were much longer than a regular kimono, but for some reason it didn't look odd on her body. From what Sasuke could see, which was only her back, he couldn't understand why she stayed in hinge form that made her look like a pre-scholar. Aru held her arms slightly as she mumbled something before a frog appeared. Aru-chan. The frog asked as he froze slightly when he saw that she was crying, though her facial expression didn't indicate she was crying. Aru-chan, are you okay? He asked, jumping up and down. I'm getting Naruto. You can barely stand, the frog said as it disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sasuke, on the other hand, just continued to watch as she finally turned. He had heard the frog talking to her, asking her if she was okay. He finally saw the left side of her face. It was nothing like the child's face he had seen before. It didn't even resemble it at all. You better leave, she said, before I kill you, she said politely. Sasuke cursed himself as he stood up and walked out of the bushes. If you're an adult, you shouldn't hide behind a child's body, he said, looking at her, still only seeing the left side of her face. If you know what's good for you, you should leave now, she continued, completely ignoring his statement. You're too weak to fight me. I heard the frog, Sasuke said, looking at her as he could see that she was looking down at nothing and then began to turn again. Her body was fully developed. It was pretty obvious by looking at her, and looking at her from bottom to top, you could tell that her favorite color was black, red, and white. That's what the colors on her kimono were. He had pointed out before that the little Aru's hair touched the ground, but the adult Aru, her hair just barely pasted her waist, though it was in a completely different style. It was being held up by red feather clips on either side of her head, allowing him to see her face. Her bangs covered the right side of her face, as if hiding something. I'm not going to tell you again, she said again as he just smirked slightly as the wind began to blow, allowing the kimono to flow along with the wind. Sasuke just smirked at her. What are you going to do, call that frog back and ask him to help you? He asked, looking at her. As she began to smirk sadistically, it almost looked like she had fangs, though it was mostly her teeth clenching together. He noticed that her eyes began to glow a slight red as she moved the bangs out of the way. I told you to leave me alone, she shouted as a gust of wind blew directly towards him as her clothing moved with the wind. Her figure disappeared from its spot, appearing behind him and then grabbing him from the back as she threw his body over her own. Sasuke barely had time to react when he noticed that she was now behind him. How the hell she was able to do that? He couldn't see to copy her technique at all. As he got thrown, he was able to rebalance himself and land on the trunk of a tree, looking at her as she just smirked at him. I promised, but I'm sure Naru wouldn't mind, she said sadistically as the wind seemed to engulf her, blowing her bangs out of her face as Sasuke was now able to see markings much like his cursed seal on the right side of her face. Her eyes glowed a deep red as she just smirked at him. You won't be getting far, she said, grinning. Sasuke didn't understand what she meant when she had said that, but he didn't really want to find out. He got his Chidori ready to attack her as she started to laugh. You think you can catch me with that slow attack? She asked, looking at him, smiling. Poor Sasuke. Only knows one technique, she said, just laughing at him as she held her stomach. She was mocking him. He could obviously tell by her laughter, which he had come to terms that it was pissing him off, only to notice that Rookie 9 appeared hiding themselves well enough for her not to notice. Yet that is. After she had slammed her fist into the ground, her bunchins had disappeared, allowing everyone to know that they were following the fake intruder, making them hightail it towards Sasuke's chakra. Good thing they could sense it, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to find her. The summoned toad had finally made his way towards Naruto after 30 minutes. Naruto. Aru-chan, the toad said, panting slightly. He wasn't made for long distances, huh? What about Aru? Naruto shouted back, picking of the toad and holding him to his face. Hurry up, tells me, he said, really concerned. She's big now, he said as Naruto gulped slightly. She was crying. Well, sort of. The toad continued. Her body was hurting. It was trembling so much. The summoned toad wasn't able to finish his sentence as Naruto had started to run quickly towards their meeting place as he had placed the toad on his head. Aru smirked as she whipped her eyes of the laughter tears. I haven't laughed so much since Nara hit that tree, she said, only to go back to her serious face. Sasuke wasn't afraid of her, or at least not for now. Sakura was starting to get pissed off. No one made fun of Sasuke and got away with it as she started to clench her fist. Ino looked at her and was going to hold her back, but she was a second too late as Sakura had jumped out of her hiding place, aiming directly for the bitch that had made fun of Sasuke. Aru, on the other hand, had noticed the former rookie 9 seconds later after they had appeared, but she hadn't wanted to say anything and wait to see what they did. Now was her chance. She smirked slightly as Sasuke noticed that Sakura had left her hiding place and headed towards Aru. "Sakura!" "And oh!" he shouted as Aru turned her head slightly to look at Sakura coming at her, as she let out a smirk, thinking that she had Aru right where she wanted her. No one thought to think that Aru had changed. Her body was different. They had noticed this, but just figured it had been a hinge the whole time and took no mind. By now, Naruto had made his way to the forest, but he lost his way. "Stupid forest," he muttered as the loud crash sound told him the way to go. "She better be okay," he said to himself as he stepped up the pace to make it there sooner. Moments later, he appeared near Sasuke as he saw that Sakura had made a crater in the ground with her enormous strength. "Where's Aru?" Naruto asked, looking at Sasuke, who was actually a bit shocked that Sakura had been able to hit the girl. "You mean that bitch?" Sakura said, smirking as Naruto's eyes began to turn a dark red. It seemed that only in times of great anger did Naruto allow the QB out. This was one of them. His whispers began to darken as his hair began to turn red unlike before. Fangs and claws as well. Sakura began to walk out of the crater as something grabbed her wrist. Where do you think you're going?" "I'm not finished with you," said Aru as her nails dug into Sakura's wrist, drawing blood. Once Naruto saw Aru, he snapped out of his phase, but was stepping back slightly. He noted her blood already dripping from her arms. She had blocked Sakura's attack. "I'm not want to give you advice, but if I were you, I would pull your teammate out of there before she loses an arm." Naruto said, he clenched his fist slightly. "Aru, let her go. Come on, she's not worth it," he said as he could tell that she was slowly losing her mind. Tsunade said she would help. "She's looking dash." He got interrupted by laughter. "Oh, Naruto, don't you ever learn?" said the voice. Nakato. Naruto muttered slightly as he looked to find the body to the voice. It seemed that every time Aru got this way, Nakatsu would be around. But how? He was never able to find out. Nakatsu was the one that pushed Aru over the edge most of the time, which wasn't a good thing. "I would get Sakura-chan out of there now," he shouted as he knew that once Aru noticed Nakatsu, she would kill anything in her path to get to Nakatsu. Aru smirked slightly as she gripped onto Sakura's wrist harder, turning her head. Something was different this time. "Aru," Naruto said, slightly looking at her as she just smirked and then looked back at Naruto. She's fighting back." Naruto mumbled, for only those near him could hear him. Rookie 9 left their hiding spots when they noticed that Sakura was being held by Aru. Sakura yelped in pain as blood started to drip from her wrist, clenching her other fist. She was about to hit Aru again, but heard Naruto shouted her name. "Sakura, whatever you did, don't hit her again. She'll kill you next time. Just stay still," he shouted as Aru began to laugh sadistically. "Why would she kill Sakura? All she did was punch her." Sasuke said as everyone was waiting for Naruto's explanation. He didn't have the time to explain things to them. Why should he anyway? They weren't worth it either way. He spent his time trying to find Nakatsu's chakra signature, but wasn't able to only to see him standing behind Aru about to grab her, but didn't have the chance as a kunai flew directly at him, but just missed him as it cut Aru's right cheek. Letting go of Sakura's wrist, who had been struggling to get free the whole time, jumped back just far enough to get at Ino's group as 10-10 held a giant shuriken in her hand. "Thanks, 10-10, Sakura said, holding her wrist as she started to heal it. "You're welcome. Anytime." "Oh, Naruto, you may want to tell your friends that they may want to leave now," Nakatsu said, smirking as he pointed towards Aru, who was not holding her cheek to try to stop the blood, or just the opposite, digging her nails in her new wound. Naruto could tell that she was trying to fight the urge to kill. He could see her digging her nails into her cheek, trying to make Seal confused, but it never worked. Her hand dropped down to her waist, all limp, like as her eyes were a blank deep red, as the smirk came back on her face even wider than ever before. Lifting her head up, her hair had been moved out of her face, as you could now see the seal across her nose before stopping on the other side of her cheek. What the hell? Orochimaru's curse seal? Sasuke said as he looked at Naruto, whose chakra was now orange again, though this time he could see tails forming. Rookie 9 all watched in horror as she charged for Sasuke for no reason, but was stopped by a cubified Naruto. Aru, stop. He growled as she just smiled at him. I told you, Naruto, the more seals, the less she listens to you. Nakatsu said, laughing as everyone just watched. They wanted to help their former friend, but they knew that if they would help him, he would probably get really angry for even touching his friend Aru. Come on, she can't be that strong. She wouldn't be able to take all of us on. Let's help Naruto, Kiba said as Akamaru barked. The others nodded slightly as they got in positions to try to asset Naruto, but not hurt his friend. So we try to capture her, and remember, Niji started no actual physical attacks. They seem to be the problem. The only way Naruto was going to win was if he allowed Kyuubi to actually take over his body. But could he risk it? Aru did a flash step, but Naruto already knew that move. He was able to keep up with her no matter what she tried. Good thing he had trained with her for 4 years, otherwise he didn't think he would be able to keep up with her. Smirking slightly, he did a few hand seals that she had thought him in case of such a thing happening, though it was going to take a lot. Her attacks seemed to be more powerful than the last time. It may have been due to the fact she now had more seals on her than before. Naruto quickly incorporated the flash technique into a hand seal, as his chakra began to glow a slight orange and grow like a balloon. Nakatsu glared slightly as he began to get pissed off. I won't let you calm her down this time. He thought to himself as he moved up his sleeve, revealing the same type of seals Aru had. He pulled out a kunai as he cut his arm, allowing the kunai to engulf it with blood as it grew into a sword-like weapon. Nakatsu charged towards Naruto, who didn't have a chance to react as kunai stabbed in through the heart. Or that's what he was about to do, but Aru had actually grabbed the blade as it cut her hand, making her blood spill on it. It didn't meet the same reaction as she glared at Nakatsu. She had never done that before as Naruto stood behind her. Mine, she managed to say before quickly letting go of the blade as clenched her fist. Aru, Naruto said slightly as he watched her from behind. She was still able to think logically, which was probably a good thing. Nakatsu's blade was the kind of blade that after cutting something and touching blood, it would absorb it into his body, pretty much like her seals, but only a bit different. They may have had similar blood, but his body didn't like it so much as it entered his system. His seals began to turn black as he held his arm. Gah. Oh, I'll get you next time. He muttered, holding his arm tightly before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto stepped back slightly as he was about to hit her with the technique, but stopped as he noticed she was still bleeding Aru. He asked, looking at her, as she turned her head to face him. You're still bleeding. Naruto shouted as he looked at her former Rookie 9, watched carefully, making sure that she didn't try anything funny or try to escape again. But seeing as Naruto was there, why would she try? Aru looked down at her hand and stared at it, as it was probably the only time her seals didn't try to ingest the blood from another host. What's he mean? That she's still bleeding? Sasuke thought as he looked at her. On the other hand, Nakatsu was having a difficult time. Her blood had gotten in his system, which he knew wasn't a good thing. The interesting thing about it was that her blood was pure while his was tainted. It seemed that her blood affected him in more ways than one. Holding his arm tightly, he lifted up the sleeve to look at his seal as he noted that halfway up this arm the seals were black. Cursing slightly before cutting his arm where the dark seals were to remove the tainted blood from his system. I should have listened to that old man. He muttered slightly. She's too dangerous if I get near her. He continued. Oh dear, did Naka-chan get poisoned by his own little twin? A voice said from somewhere behind Nakatsu. Shut up. Nakatsu said, looking behind him. She's not a treat. He muttered as the voice started to laugh. Not a treat. Your little twin here is able to kill us. Good thing is she had no idea. The voice said as a figure appeared behind him. Naka, serious. You should have killed her back when she was only 12 instead of making her more powerful. What's going to happen when someone figures out that her seals are? The person got interrupted. I said shut up. Nakatsu said, enraged, as he was about to punch the person behind him. Hero, just shut up. I'll kill her when I'm good and ready, Nakatsu said as Hiro laughed. You think I'll believe you, my friend? He said, shaking his head. You know I can get Aru, or 26, whatever you call her, in the palm of my own hand, Hiro said, smirking. Your father has given you enough time. The more time she spends with Naruto, the less you'll be able to kill her, he said, looking at him. Nakatsu was starting to get a lot more angry at his so-called friend Hiro. You're not a friend, he muttered as he held his arm. Oh yes, I am. And you know it's seeing as my family's secret is complete different from yours, he said, smirking as Nakatsu started to laugh. What? You think that little light show will trick her? He asked, looking at him. Hiro leaned against the tree. I was able to make you and them believe your wound was real, Hiro said, looking at him as Nakatsu's looked at his arm to see that his wound was gone along with all the blood that had dripped out. You bastard, Nakatsu muttered, pissed off. You made me feel all that pain. Nakatsu grunted as Hiro just smirked as his body disappeared. A figure walked through town, smirking slightly as he opened his eyes. It's my turn now. As he walked ahead towards the Hokage's tower, smirking. I'm coming for you, Aru, he said to himself, laughing as villagers stared at him as he talked and laughed to himself. The villagers knew by the look of this new face that something wasn't right. They were going to have to let a ninja nearby know about the new man. As things seemed to calm down, Naruto had picked up Aru before she pasted out, closing his eyes. As he said, Hinge, he shouted, as there was a poof as Aru's body was back to her little child form. Naruto's the one behind the girl's hinge, Neji thought as he watched his former friend hold the little girl. Everything will be okay, Naruto mumbled as he held her tightly. Sasuke watched as he glared. Slightly, Naruto was still stronger than him, even if he had gone to Orochimaru and trained with him for over 3 years. Cursing slightly to himself, Sasuke turned around to walk away as Sakura noticed him leaving. Sasuke, hold on, she shouted as Naruto watched him leave. He's at fault for Aru being like this, Naruto said, rather pissed off. Had he just left her alone? Had you all leave her alone, she wouldn't be this way. Naruto shouted at them, shocking them all. Everything had seemed all right up to until then. What had changed? Well, nothing really. Naruto hadn't fully calmed down, and Kyuubi still had a small hold on him. Red chakra engulfed both his and Aru's body before former Rookie 9 made a break for it to get a safe distance away from him, seeing as they thought as he was going to attack them. Screaming slightly as an explosion could be heard from where Naruto had been. Naruto, on the other hand, was smirking evilly. They fell for it, Aru, he said softly as her small frame clenched onto his shirt. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left you, he continued as Aru began to wake up slowly. What? She muttered, looking around, seeing that they were at their hideout camp. She slowly got up and looked at her body, noticing that she was a child again. I don't need you to hinge my body, she started as Naruto just looked at her and started to laugh. Yes, I would rather I keep its powers hiding your body instead of it making me go insane, Naruto said, referring to something. Well, I don't need it now. Besides, you've hinged my body for over a year now. I want to see it, she protested, looking at him as he smiled. Fine, but you almost lost control again, Aru. This time was worse, Naruto said as he released the hinge and looked at her before he noticed she was removing her cloths. GH, what are you doing? He shouted at her as she looked dully at him. Changing, she said, not saying much else as he just sighed. Aru, you still haven't learned you change front of me, he said as his face turned red as he began to imagine Aru naked, getting a goofy look on his face. Naruto knew Aru had a gorgeous body. He was going to admit that, but all the markings ruined it. Going into a daydream, Aru's voice interrupted him. Naruto, she said, sounding a little shocked as he opened his eyes to look at her and then quickly closed them again, noticing she was still half naked, only with a bandaged chest and panties on. Naruto, look at me, she shouted at him as he followed her orders and looked at her. Yes, he asked as he tried to look away, but couldn't. He could see that the seal was now on the base of her neck, running up her cheek and making it look like she had a scar on her eye. But the interesting thing wasn't her new seals. It was the seals that weren't on her arms anymore. Her arms were completely sealless, as if they were retracting. What did I do while I was consumed by blood? She asked, looking at him. Naruto was shocked, to say the least. Nothing. Wait. You to take a blade to the hands, he said as he grabbed her hands and turned them around to see that the wound was still there. Rue, this hasn't happened before, he said, looking at her. Somewhere in the village, Sasuke was walking around, cursing to himself. Damn it, he's still stronger than me, he thought, as he seemed to be walking for hours, as well as in circles around the ramen shack. Stopping for a moment, he tried to figure what his former friend meant when the girl was still bleeding. That's what happens when you get cut, he thought. As he walked, someone had bumped into him, not really apologizing, as they continued to walk off. Usually it didn't really bother Sasuke, but today he had to release some anger on someone, and it seemed that this person was going to have to be it. The person smirked as he felt that Sasuke had grabbed onto his shoulder. When Sasuke saw his face, his eyes widened in disbelief. Why was he here? I killed you, Sasuke mumbled as the person just smirked at him. End of Chapter 5, unedited Chapter 6. Recap. As he walked, someone had bumped into him, not really apologizing, as they continued to walk off. Usually it didn't really bother Sasuke, but today he had to release some anger on someone, and it seemed that this person was going to have to be it. The person smirked as he felt that Sasuke had grabbed onto his shoulder. When Sasuke saw his face, his eyes widened in disbelief. Why was he here? I killed you, Sasuke mumbled as the person just smirked at him. End of recap. You're dead, Sasuke said as he stared the person straight in the eyes. I beg to differ. I'm standing right here in front of you, the man said, smirking at him. You made a miscalculation in your attack, he said as a hand went to his face, ripping the mask off, revealing Kabuto smirking. You forgot about my subordinate, he told Sasuke as he moved back slightly. In truth, this was all Hiro's doing, but he wasn't going to allow anyone to figure that out. It was true that Orochimaru was presumed dead, but no one really knew for sure, and the last thing he heard from his boss was that Orochimaru was still very much alive, just hiding out for now. Hiro smirked as he watched the look on Sasuke's face change from being scared shitless to an angry face. Oh, don't you worry, boy. I will have your body, he said, grinning like a fool at Sasuke. This trick was a very low level compared to what Hiro usually did, but he was able to enter the mind of a person, find out his deepest fears, and expose them if he wished it. It all depended on what he was in the mood for. And today's mood was to mess with Sasuke's head a little. Aru, on the other hand, had managed to get away from Naruto when he had gone to take a bath. She felt like he was too overprotective of her. Well, he probably had a reason to be. But sometimes she just wanted to be by herself and be left alone. Usually after going blood crazy, she didn't want to be around him. Usually because she felt that if she had completely lost control, she could probably kill him. Well, she wasn't sure, but she didn't want to find out. She hadn't been paying attention at all to where she had been going and found herself lost, getting a small sweat drop on her forehead. She shook her head. Maybe I should stop hanging out with Naru, she thought to herself. She was once again in her small body looking around. It seemed that the ANBU squads had backed off since they had appeared. Must have been the Hokages doing, she thought, as she turned a corner to spot Sasuke, Naruto's once friend, talking to someone. That chakra. She mumbled slightly as she watched the look on Sasuke's face change, and then noticed that Chidori charging up, and then missing as the figure disappeared and reappeared behind him. Step, dance, she said as her eyes narrowed on the person standing behind Sasuke. Ah, you really think you can hit me with that little thing? Orochimaru said, looking at Sasuke, and then seeing a little girl standing much farther behind Sasuke. Maybe I should kill her, he said as Sasuke turned his head to see who he was talking about, to see Aru standing there. Oh, great, he thought to himself, getting even more angry. If she's around Naruto's not far behind, he muttered as he turned back to see Orochimaru only a few steps away from him. Crap, he said as every had happened to fast to notice. Well, only to feel that he was grabbed from behind and pulled back. Stop messing with someone fears, Aru said, looking at a rooftop as she held on his Sasuke cloths, wanting to throw him, but didn't. She knew that Naruto still thought of him as a friend and didn't really want anything bad to happen to him. All he really wanted was to get it through Sasuke's thick skull that power didn't come from going to the bad side. But it seemed that he still didn't understand that. Oh, you saw through it. Another voice said that had actually been the original plan, which seemed to be turning out rather well. I was having so much fun too. The male voice said as the figure appeared while Orochimaru's just stood there smirking. It was all a fake, Sasuke. Aru said. Genjutsu, he said, looking down at her for a moment. Why hadn't his Sharingan been able to see through it? And why was she helping him? Oh, please, give me a little more credit than that. Aru smirked. No, it wasn't. It did step dance. It was very real. She said, letting go of Sasuke, who was now trying to figure out why she didn't just let the little game go on. In truth, Aru was probably not as sadistic as everyone thought she was. Well, she wasn't really going to allow them the pleasure of knowing it all. Oh, how cute. The little girl knew about step dance, he said, beginning to laugh, as his cloths were now more visible to Sasuke. Hakastuki, he mumbled as Aru just looked at him. She remembered Naruto mentioning something about them back when they first met, but they've been able to avoid them easily with a few techniques learned from Aru. He's part of them? Aru asked, looking at Sasuke, dumbfounded, who nodded. Hiro smirked. This was all part of this plan to get Aru in the palm of his hand, but it was going to take time he was willing to spend on her. By the look of his cloths, yes, Sasuke said, looking at her as he made sure to watch this new member's step. I guess the cloths gave it away, huh? Hiro replied, looking at them as he smirked. Though, Sasuke began as Hiro quickly interrupted him. Though we usually run in packs, he said, finishing Sasuke's sentence. Remember what the girl said? I like going in your mind. He said, smirking, doesn't matter if you have that Sharingan active. I've got my ways around it. He said, smirking, I do hang around Itachi, you know. In truth, Hiro wasn't part of Akatsuki, but it was all a part of his plan to trick both sides of the game. After this, he would go to Akatsuki and pretend to be one of the goody-goodies. This was going to be so much fun. Smiling to himself, he watched Aru's movements as he could already tell that she was in pain. Oh, poor girl, did that little fight earlier tire you out? He asked, smirking at her as she clenched her fist. Maybe you should get Naruto to dispel that hinge on your body, he said as Sasuke looked back down at her. What? Naruto hinges her? How is he even able to do that? He shouted in his mind, really confused. Oh, don't be confused, Sasuke. It's just a little trick he picked up when he found her bloody body under some corpses, Hiro said, smirking for a minute before noticing that he was no longer getting information from Aru's mind. What? He thought as he felt a cold blade touch his skin. Don't underestimate me, she said as the clone disappeared from in front of him. Finally come out of your protective shell, huh? Hiro said, smirking. You should know that his power can't protect you forever. Hiro whispered as his body seemed to slowly disappear, smirking at her. Remember this, girl? Akatsuki will come back for him, he said as his head disappeared. Sasuke watched as the grown-up Aru was standing in front of him now. Her cloths had changed again. This time they were just regular cloths. Her hair wasn't even done up or anything. It was probably similar to the first time Naruto had found her in the cave, wearing ripped cloths, only this time they were brand new and black. Thanks, Sasuke said as she just looked at him in H. She replied as she looked around. Her bangs covered half of her face again, though she didn't seem bothered by it one bit. How come Naruto's not around? Sasuke asked as she started to walk. He's taking a shower, she replied, which actually kind of shocked Sasuke. Her personality was completely different from the little child he first saw with Naruto by the Hokage's tower. Shower? Sasuke said, looking at her rather odd as she stopped, and then looked back at him. He's busy taking a shower. I snuck out, she replied as she began to look around, trying to find her way back to Naruto's place, but couldn't even remember the street name. No good, she said dully. For a moment, Sasuke thought this was going to be his chance to find out what Naruto had been up to for the past 4 years, but that was going to be a little tricky as Aru didn't seem very open at all. You don't remember where you were staying? He asked as she shook her head. Not really. Guess I've been hanging out with Naruto for too long, she said as she began to walk again. Well, if you snuck out, then I'm sure Naruto will start searching for you soon, he said as stopped and turned around. He probably will do that in an hour, she replied as Sasuke just sighed. How is Naruto? Even able to stand this girl, she seemed like she was giving him the go-around every time he asked her a question. Fine then, Sasuke said as if was about to leave her by herself, and then decided to ask her if she was hungry. Her expression had completely changed as she began to smile. Only a little though, but that wasn't the point. Food I like, food, she said looking at him. Guess she would try to understand why Naruto still wanted to be friends with Sasuke if he had her, though she wasn't going to question it and find out. About 10 minutes later, Sasuke and Aru had found a place to sit and eat as she ordered something that wasn't even on the menu, but it didn't seem to matter to her, as the chef just smiled at her and took her order anyway. Sasuke, on the other hand, had only ordered some water as he watched her eat. What was so interesting about her? Why was he so fascinated with the way that she acted? One minute she would be all cheerful, and the next she would be rather cold and held back. At one point during the whole little food escapade, Sasuke had been staring at her as she ate her food. If you have something to ask, just ask it instead of staring at me, she said as she brought the fork down from her mouth and then looked up at him. Sasuke snapped out of it as he jumped out of his seat slightly when she had started to talk. Giving her a look, he just shrugged. I'm only here 'cause you're still a treat to this village, he started to say as Aru interrupted him. Treat maybe, but what does that say about you bring here? You're more of a treat than I am. She told him, I didn't betray all my friends. All I did was kill a whole bunch of scientists, she said, smiling like there was nothing wrong with that. Sasuke just gave her a look as she had gone back to eating when she noticed that Naruto had finally noticed she was gone. She had began to smile heavily as she looked at Sasuke. This is going to be fun, she said under her breath, getting up and grabbing Sasuke's arm after paying for a meal. Oh, hey, what are you doing? Sasuke shouted at her as she just ignored him, pulling him out into the middle of the street. It's so good to be in my body, she said. I want to take it out for a spin before Naruto hinges it again, she said, grinning. What? Now Sasuke was confused. What did she mean? He had seen her get out of it while she was sort of fighting the new Akatsuki member. Oh, he hinges my body, if you didn't notice, but I can't dispel it until I nullify his churka, and that takes a lot out of me, she said, and besides, I haven't done step dance in my real body in about a year and a half. Either way, that's all you need to know, she said, grabbing him and smiling as Sakura was turning the corner to see Sasuke, but then only to see the bitch, or so she called her, grabbing onto Sasuke's arm and then disappearing. Step dance, she mumbled as they disappeared, which was actually her just moving really fast as she passed right by Sakura, who didn't even notice they were gone until the image of their bodies disappeared. They both reappeared on top of the Hokage's monuments as she sat down and laughed. Oh, that was so much fun, she said, smiling. Sasuke was still a little blown away by that technique. He wanted to get his hands on how she did it. Naruto seemed to know it as well. She was the only one that could have to add it to him. That jutsu, he said as she had started to calm down. That jutsu, how did you do it? He asked as she had stopped laughing. Step dance. She replied back. That's for me to know, and you to try and find out. You can't copy it. So don't even try, she said, looking back at him before she flinched in quite a lot of pain. The seal was burning as she held her body. Hey, you okay? He asked her as the seal seemed to flash on her entire body. Trembling slightly, she looked at her arms as she got up slowly and turned around to face Sasuke. The marks were now all over her entire body. Yes, it isn't right, she stuttered as she began to move back. Hey, hold on a second. I didn't even touch you, Sasuke shouted at him, thinking that he probably triggered something off. Naruto, on the other hand, had finally picked up her chakra as he noticed that there was a spike in her level. Oh shit, he said as he hurried again. God damn it. Why doesn't she listen to me? He said to himself as he was about to be on his way before Aru fell off the end of the monument. Shit, Sasuke said as he quickly jumped after her. He managed to grab her before she hit anything, but on the ground that wasn't what Naruto saw. That bastard, Naruto shouted as he saw him taking her back to the top of the monument. Naruto followed him to the top and was pissed off. What the fuck did you do to her? He shouted at Sasuke just as he was about to put her down when Naruto grabbed her out of his hands. Hey, Sasuke shouted back at Naruto. I haven't done anything to her. You dope, he yelled back as Aru began to wake up and then hit Naruto on the head. I'm fine, she said, pissed off. He didn't do anything. He just took me out for food, and then I showed him step dance, she said, looking at Naruto. He didn't seem to want to put her down. Hinge, he said as he didn't seem to be listening to her at all. You stay away from her, or I will kill you the next time I see, he said before something started to pull on his ear. Are you listening to me? Aru shouted at him in a childish voice. I think she has something to say something to you, Sasuke said, turning his back on Naruto, who looked down to see a very red-faced Aru starting back at him, pissed off. Aru, I told you not to leave, he shouted at her as she disappeared from his arms and appeared in between both of them. You should listen to me for once, she shouted at him as she clenched her fist. He didn't do anything to me, she continued, but, he said, looked at her, trying to explain to her that the village was dangerous, but she didn't want to listen to him. Aru held her arm tightly. He didn't do anything. Something wasn't right, she said as she lifted her sleeve, revealing the markings were back. I felt them growing, she told him, and I didn't do anything either. All I did was make sure a mirror image of a bad guy didn't kill Sasuke, she said. He was in an Akatsuki, I think, she said as Naruto grabbed her and pulled her away from Sasuke. He shouted, looking at her. He had spent the past 4 years evading them. Now they were here. I don't know, he was just wearing that thingy cloak, she said as Sasuke started to walk away. A new guy showed up from Akatsuki, Sasuke said, looking at Naruto. New guy, he replied as he let go of Aru's arm. We need to get out of here, he told her. As soon as Tsunade helps you, we're out of here, he told her as she just looked down and nodded. Aru looked at him and sighed. Why should we continue running? You know I can kill them all, she said, looking at him. I'm tired of running. It doesn't matter either way. They always find us. Nakastu and Akatsuki, she said, looking at him. Naruto looked down at the ground slightly. She was right. She was always right. But that doesn't change the fact that you're getting worse, he said as he smiled. Oh, don't worry. You know, it was at its worst a few years ago, she said, smiling at him as nothing was wrong. It was true. Her worst case of having her markings all over her body was when he first found her. She had hidden her body from him for the first couple of weeks, but when she went to take a bath, she had forgotten to tell him. And so he went looking for her. He found her all right, naked taking a bath, but not before he saw all her markings. A man smirked as he watched the group talking. He listened in on their conversation and smirked. You think that was bad, my little girl? He thought to himself, grinning evilly. He watched her and smiled. If you do something, you do it yourself, he said as it seemed he was talking to himself. Flashback. What is that mistake still doing here? The man asked as he saw 2 children playing with each other. I do not want to hear, he shouted at the woman across from him. The children both looked up at the same time. Both looked completely alike. Other than their hair color, they looked the same. Yui, she's only a child. She can't do anything yet, the woman said, looking at him as he glared at the little girl who was smiling and playing with her twin sibling. Yui picked up the boy and glared at her. Nakatsu is just playing with Na. The girl got interrupted by Yui. And no, you do not allow him to play with that mistake, he shouted back as the little girl just looked up rather shocked at what the man had grabbed Natashi. Take him, he said, giving him to the woman as he glared at the little boy. The little girl, still on the ground, was about to begin to cry as Yui grabbed child by the arm and pulled her up. You're coming with me, he said, rather angry. The little girl had fallen asleep, or that's what you would think if you saw her sleeping. Really, Yui had put a sleeping jutsu on her, so she would stop crying. Hours later, he finally got to the cave dock. Yui shouted, seeming angry. What did you do letting this abomination out? He asked, looking at the man in the white coat. The man in the white lab coat smirked. Your wife came here. She asked that I let her go, he said, looking Yui, smirking. I do not go against the wishes of the Great One's wife. He said, your wife cares a great deal about your second child. He said, oh, my mistake. Your first one, he said, smirking. You know that your son will not reach her level of power. He's only a clone of her DNA. The doctor said, smirking. He can only become so powerful unless otherwise told. He said, grinning. Her body is more powerful, more. The doctor was saying before he was interrupted by Yui slamming his fist down on the table. You do not speak of this thing like that. It is a defect, he shouted back. The doctor started to laugh. I find it funny how you think that way. He continued smirking. Even after you gave her, oh, I'm sorry. It to me to test, he said as he walked to his desk and picked up a file. This file is the beginning of my research on it. When you said that something was different about your firstborn, the doctor said as he opened it up and smirked. It seemed that you were right. It does have something completely different from your bloodline. Her DNA is completely different than that of yours. You've told me in the past, my friend, that every generation in your family has a child that is deemed unworthy of the name. The doctor said, as Yui just continued to listen. It seems that in your DNA, it's reached its limit in evolving, while her entire DNA structure is different. There are things in her DNA strand that shouldn't even be there, he said as Yui was about to say something, but the doctor stopped him. And before you say, yes, she's a defect, he said, imitating how Yui would have said it, he then began to laugh. Yui, you also once told me that you had a twin, but I do not remember ever meeting him. He said, it could be possible that this defect is trying to escape death by resisting everything. How many drugs do you think I've given her? Way too many to count, he said, shaking his head as he looked at the little girl sitting on the counter. Walking over to her, he lifted her sleeves. I'm sure your son hasn't shown these yet. They aren't supposed to be there until they are about 5 years old. Something about the pressure that it emits while it grows on your body, right? He asked, looking at Yui, who just nodded. Even at the age of 5? It's painful, isn't it? The doctor asked before he cut the sleeve off all the way up to her neck. She is only 2, and yet she smiles and plays not caring as it begins to cover her body. He said as Yui's eyes widened. It had been true that his father had told him about having a twin, but he never told him why he never saw them. He learned years later that his twin had been killed after the age of 3, after it was figured which one of them was the defect. He now knew how they had figured that out, but the doctor had a point. If there was something in her DNA that could develop his other child abilities, he wanted it. So, what are you saying? Yui asked, looking at his old friend. Well, I'm saying, Yui, well, you see, I was going to tell you about this later, but I plan on putting her under heavy observation. I want to see how much she can really take. He told Yui, who thought about it. The minute that she shows signs of anything, you get rid of her, Yui said as the doc smirked. That had been the end of their conversation until she reached 7. In flashback, Yui watched the little girl standing in between 2 boys. She has not changed, he said, surprised for a moment before noticing something off about her. Despite the fact that you say she's more advanced than my son, she's experiencing what he had at 10, he said quietly to his friend who was now standing behind him. Yui, you do understand that because she is different from your son, she will do things differently. The doctor said, besides, I've actually never heard you mention her as a she. This is new, he said, smirking as Yui grinned. Don't get your hopes up. I've sent Nakatsu after her many times. It seems that he is not strong enough to kill her, he said. Because she is still alive, he has not been able to advance in his training. He still feels connected to her. Yui said, as in another part of Konoha, Nakatsu leaned against a wall in pain. Damn that, Arg. He almost screamed in pain as he held his stomach, even though the pain he was feeling was coming nowhere from that area. Why are they? He said before he slowly passed out. This was a new feeling. Nakatsu had never felt it before. He had always been brought up to hate her, even though when he had been little he had been playing in an area he shouldn't have, and he bumped into her. At the time, he thought that she was just a cousin. She had the same markings like him on his arm, but hers were more advanced. When his father had found out where he had been and who he had been hanging out with, he almost got the beating of his life. Nakatsu at the time never understood why his father had been so angry about that girl. Even though he found her a bit strange, seeing as she never spoke, only smiled. That had been when he was 6, after his father found out. He didn't see the girl again until he was 13. On the other side, while a passed-out Nakatsu laid against the wall, Sakura had passed right by. When she noticed him, she stopped, seeing that he had rather nice clothes on, and wondered if he was okay. "Hey, you okay?" she asked as she saw that he wasn't about to respond. His body was burning up. Lifting him up and grabbing his stuff, she never really noticed that he had been a man that attacked Naruto's little bitch of a girlfriend. Just like Aru, Nakatsu his appearance as well. Or actually, Hiro did it for him in a way. Whenever Nakatsu would battle someone, his appearance would change. In this case with Aru, he would take on a more similar appearance to her, but really he was more built than the person she had seen earlier. He was also taller along with his appearance. His hair was a silver color about shoulder length, but nicely cut. While his cloths were very elegant and very expensive, Sakura thought. She saw the family crest on the back of his top, a little surprised seeing as she had never once seen that one before. She brought him to the hospital so that they could try to help him, but it seemed that he had began to wake up when the doctor was trying to take his blood. Nakatsu didn't know what had happened. He remembered passing out, but not walking to the hospital. Glaring around slightly, he saw a rather scared doctor. "I don't like people taking my blood without permission," he said, knowing that the slightest markings on his body right now, when he was in this state, would harm him. "How'd I get here?" he shouted at Sakura, had just walked in to see a half-naked guy sitting on the bed but holding the doctor by the neck. "You shouldn't be angry with him. I brought you here," Sakura said as Nakatsu let go of the doctor, who quickly moved back. His body, unlike Aru's, had no markings at all. Well, he did, but he could make them appear depending on how much power her wanted. But lately, when he would be around her, he wouldn't be able to control himself. It seemed that every time they were around each other, they would want to kill each other. Maybe it was common. His father had always told him to kill her if he saw her, never to be nice to her, though he remembered when he was younger that they used to be friends. That was a long time ago. "Why, you're her, Friday." Nakatsu was about to say that he knew who she was and didn't like the face that he was around her, but stopped when he realized that he was in enemy hands. He couldn't let them know that he was the man from before. "Nothing, never mind," he said, looking around. "How come I'm here?" he asked, looking at her. "Oh, well, I was walking down the street trying to find my friend, and there you were passed out on the ground. You had a really bad fever, but it seems to have gone down," she told him, smiling. She found him cute and thought it would be nice to help out a cute boy. "I'm Sakura, and you are?" she asked, looking at him, smiling. "It'd be best if I don't tell her my real name." Nakatsu, though looking down, whose name could he say? "I am Nanashi," he blurted out as Sakura just looked at him funny. "Nanashur, doesn't that mean no name?" she asked as he just smiled. "Huh, so assuming my parents call me that," he lied as she just watched him. He began to get up as he could feel that Sakura was watching him. I think I'd better get going," Nanashur said when Sakura realized she was staring and turned around. "Wait, you still have a fever," she said as he turned around after getting dressed again. "I'll be fine," Nanashur said as Sakura couldn't believe how good the cloths looked on him. Nanashur," Sakura began to say as screaming could be heard from the hallway. "This is all your fault. Had you not kidnapped her, she would be fine," Naruto said as he was holding an unconscious Aru walking by the room, not noticing Sakura, seeing as he was way too busy with yelling at Sasuke to care. Sakura popped her head out the door to see the two walking alongside each other. It was strange to see them walking together and arguing. It seemed just like old times. She smiled slightly as she stepped out the door to shout out their names. "Hey guys," she shouted as Sasuke looked behind him while Naruto just stopped walking and turned also. Nanashur, on the other hand, was trying to get out of there so that he could get back to his mission, but then at that moment he listened to them arguing and then smirked. He had noticed that this Sakura girl found him attractive. He could play with that affection. He walked out in the hallway to see who Sakura was speaking to and then cursed himself. "Shit, figures I run into these two," he thought to himself as Sasuke was giving Nanashur an odd look. "Oh, this is Nanashur. He was unconscious, so I brought him here," Sakura said, smiling at Nanashur as he smirked. "I'm in deep shit if she recognizes me," Nanashur thought as he saw that she was passed out. "Oh, what's wrong with that girl?" Nanashur asked, watching Naruto's reaction change. "I don't know," he said as he brought her to the room and laid her down. Nanashur looked at her body and saw what was wrong. He knew it had happened to him when he was 10. "This explains my pain," He thought to himself as he held his arm, feeling her pain the closer he was to her. This is going to be annoying if I stay around her long. He continued to think. Outside the building, Yui smirked. It seems that he's more connected to her than I, though, he said as the doctor just shook his head. Hiro, show yourself. I know that you are there. Yui said as Hiro smirked and appeared beside Nakatsu's father. Wow, it pains me to see him there, not? Hiro said, almost laughing his ass off. Hiro, did you do what I asked? Yui said, turning to face him. Yes, the next phase of the plan is in progress. My illusions are making Akatsuki believe I'm one of the goody-goodies right now, he said, smirking. And, hey everyone, I'm really sorry about all that waiting. So I finished this so you could all read the next chapter. Chapter 8. Recap. Hiro, show yourself. I know that you are there. Yui said as Hiro smirked and appeared beside Nakatsu's father. Wow, it pains me to see him there, not? Hiro said, almost laughing his ass off. Hiro, did you do what I asked? Yui said, turning to face him. Yes, the next phase of the plan is in progress. My illusions are making Akatsuki believe I'm one of the goody-goodies right now, he said, smirking. End of recap. Nanashir watched Aru sleeping as Sakura had not let him leave yet. Look, Sakura-chan, really I'm fine, he said, wanted to get away from her seeing, as he wasn't really used to this kind of attention one bit. Sakura looked at him and smiled. No, you're not. Your fever hasn't gone down yet, she told him as he just sighed. This was way too much attention by his part. His parents had never given him much attention when he had started to get older. He could barely remember his mother. She had died a little bit after Nanashir had been taken away from her. He could remember when his sister was around, she was the only one that played with him. He remembered that when his father had left him in the forest to fend for himself, he ran into a girl that had the same marking as him, but hers seemed to be more advanced. His father had told him about how the stages worked. The older you're, the more complex the markings were, but on this girl the markings are at stage 3, that of a 20-year-old, and she was only 10. He could remember her always smiling when they met up in secret. He quite enjoyed it, though after a little, while her smile disappeared, just the Aru he knew now, she never smiled. Even though his father didn't know it, Nakatsu had always been watching Aru after she almost killed him the last time. Yui, his father, had always told him that she was evil and that she was not worth ever mentioning. If Nakatsu ever mentioned his twin, he would always get a beating, so he learned to stop telling his father about anything. Though it never really seemed like Yui cared at all, he always seemed to be too obsessed with his sister despite the fact that he had told Nakatsu never to mention her. Nanashir, Sakura said, waving her hand in front of his face, trying to get his attention. You zone out, she said when he snapped back into reality. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking about someone, he said as he could see that her face went from worried to sad. Oh, not that kind of someone, he quickly said, although he didn't know why he said it. Naruto, on the other hand, was watching Aru as she continued to sleep, though it wasn't a very peaceful sleep. The markings were burning her skin slowly. Nanashir flinched slightly when he started to feel his arm in flames. Though it wasn't really happening to him, the closer he was to her, the more pain he could feel. There was a knock on the door when a nurse came into the room, telling Naruto that Tsunade wished to see him. What, now? I'm not going, he said as the nurse sighed. She told me to tell you that it is really important and that you must see her now, she said as Naruto sighed. Don't worry. She's sleeping. She should be fine, the nurse said as he nodded. Don't worry, Naruto. I'm here. I'll make sure she's okay, Sakura said, though she wasn't really going to watch Aru, just wanted to make you want to be friends with her again. Sakura, stop lying. It really doesn't suit you, he said as he got up and began to walk out of the room. You touch her, and I will rip you to pieces, he said sadistically with a smirk on his face, looking like he would enjoy it. Maybe we should get another room, Nanashir said, as Sakura just stood there shocked. Sasuke had walked into the room about 10 minutes after Naruto left and saw Sakura sitting there, still a little shocked at what Naruto had said to her. She okay? Sasuke asked Nanashir, who just shrugged. I don't know what's going on between you three. That guy said he would rip her to pieces if she touched this girl, he said, pointing to Aru, who had now begun to walk up. Aru looked around, still half awake, as she began to notice that there were other people in the room with her. She quickly jumped out of bed, only to yelp in pain, seeing as she had not noticed that her seals had begun to burn her skin. She was about to fall when Sasuke was about to grab her, but it appeared that Nanisher moved faster than him. Shit, Nakatsu thought as he held onto Aru lightly. He could already tell that Sasuke was looking at him strangely. Shit, shit, shit. He continued to think as he felt Aru beginning to struggle in his hold. Oh, sorry, he said, letting her go as she had grabbed onto the end of the table. What happened? She asked in a monotone voice. Sasuke gave Nanisher a glare before turning to look at Aru, noticing the burns on her arms and legs. You fainted after the little get-together at the monument, Sasuke told her as she nodded. Oh, it seems to happen more now, she said to herself slightly as Nanisher walked back slowly to his bed. Why'd I get stuck here? He thought to himself. And why the hell did I help her up? Nonetheless, use step dance, he thought, shaking his head. That move? Sasuke began to say as he was about to drill Nanisher for the answer. It was similar to Aru's, he said as Nanisher seemed to freeze. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied, trying to evade the question. I just reacted she was going to fall, he said, as Sakura seemed to snap out of it after she noticed that Nanisher had gotten out of the bed. She grabbed his arm, as he seemed to flinch in pain, but did not let it show too much. His arm burned very much like Aru's. Damn it, damn her. Why can't she just die and leave me alone, he thought as he bit his lip hard, holding back a scream. Sasuke had noticed the sudden change, but wasn't about to confront this new person now, while Sakura was here. She seemed to have taken an interest in him. The three of them were too busy to notice that Aru had actually opened a window and jumped out to get away from them. She could not deal with too many people, let alone three. She only liked being around Naruto, and even that had taken some time to get used to. Sasuke had finally noticed when he turned around to talk to Aru when he saw she had gone. Shit, he muttered as he followed her out the window. His Sharingan was working overtime to find her. No. Why am I even going after her? He thought as he continued to try to find her. Aru was good at hiding even in her adult body, though it was a lot harder at this point, seeing as she could not do any technique. It was because of those stupid burns. She cursed herself slightly as she continued to walk and hide her chakra from anyone, mostly Sasuke and Naruto, who would go looking for her. She continued walking, not really looking where she was going, when she bumped into someone. Losing her balance, she fell to the ground as the person just smirked at her. Oh my, he said, smirking as she looked up to see who she had actually slammed into. You know you should already be dead. You don't even know how to get rid of those burns, he scuffed as she looked down at her. Aru began to recognize him as her eyes widened. She mumbled as she pushed herself back up as she started to step back, but was grabbed by the man. What? No, hello, daddy. I missed you, he said sarcastically at her. Aru screamed slightly as Yui grabbed her arm harder. Let me see why I should fear you, he shouted. Come on, he said, rather anger, as Sasuke had now begun to make his way towards her screams. Hold on, he said. He did not understand why, but he was drawn towards her screams. Naruto, you better get here also, he thought, not really wanting to admit it for a second. The moment he got there, he saw a man in similar clothing to Nanisher holding onto Aru. Let her go, Sasuke said, as he appeared behind him, his fan-like weapon already in attack mode. You have to excuse me, I cannot remember his weapon's name. It looks like a fan to me. Yui just smirked. Kid, you won't be able to catch me with that, he said as he threw Aru to the ground, turning around to face Sasuke. Oh, what do we have here? The heir to the Uchiha clan, he said, smirking. Boy, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. She has to die, he said calmly. If she doesn't, she'll just continue killing, he continued to say as Aru's skin began to heal. Look, she's going to attack both of us soon. Once her skin heals, she'll just attack. That's all she knows, he said, smirking. You can even ask your new friend, Nanisher, or whatever he calls himself. He went through the same thing, he said, smirking. That's why he knows step dance. That's why his arm is burning right now. And she's why he has a fever, he said, starting to laugh. You shouldn't be asking why I'm here. You should be more concerned about your other friend. Really, Nanisher likes to kill. That's what he was born for. That's what he does. Yui said, smirking, as he knew he was lying. Nakatsu was never much of the killer. In a way, he had hoped that Aru would be the firstborn. Her favorite thing was the smell of blood. Go away, Aru said as her skin healed. Yui, on the other hand, wasn't really too worried as he saw her getting up, though. What he didn't notice was that all her seals retracted to one seal on her back. Her skin had healed at a rather fast rate as she glared at him with red eyes. You are no father to me, she stated, hissing slightly. You should fear me, she said, smirking. I'm stronger than you will ever be, she said, smirking. I know what you are. You're just like me. Father, she said sarcastically. That's why you can't kill me, she told him as she smirked as the tattoo on her cheek burned red. Sasuke, on the other hand, moved back slightly when he noticed the man's chakra rising. Oh, you're so naive, he told her, smirking. You know what will happen if I kill you? Nakatsu will die also, he said, smirking, not really caring much. Not really a big worry. He just a pawn in my game, he told her as Aru just smirked. Aru is sleeping now, she said, as Aru's hair seemed to change color from jet black to silver. It seemed to work better with her now red eyes. She's been sleeping for a little while, she told him. Yui looked at her confused, as Sasuke just got ready to attack the intruder soon, though he listened to what they were saying to make sure he asked this Nanisher about everything. At the hospital, Nanisher noticed the sudden spike in chakra coming from his sister and quickly jumped out of bed. Shit, he muttered as he ran out of the hospital room using step dance, not giving Sakura a chance to grab onto him and pull him back into the bed. Sorry, not this time, Sakura, he said as he quickly made his way towards the scene, only to be stopped by Hiro. Where you going, my friend? Hiro asked, looking at Nakatsu, smirking slightly. I wanted to see what father is planning. He doesn't usually show himself, he told Hiro as the man in front of him just smirked, walking up toward Nakatsu as he just touched his cheek. Why do you want to interfere with him? He can kill you, you know, he said, concerned about his friend, as Hiro just pulled Nakatsu towards him and kissed him. You know, I can make you see whatever you want. Why not just let me? Hiro said as he changed his appearance into a Ru adult. I can tell you want her. You hide it. You think your father doesn't know that you've been watching her, Hiro said, though it came out of Aru's mouth. I can be her, he said as Nakatsu looked at him grossed out. Hiro, stop messing around, he said as he looked at his own body and noticed that he was in his fake body. Take this stupid illusion off of me right now. I'm not fighting anyone, he said as he just ran right by him. He was just there to distract me, he thought to himself as he continued to make his way towards the area where Aru was. He didn't really appreciate that, did he, Hiro? A voice came up from behind him. Shut up, Abe. By now, Master has probably dealt with Aru. Ah, don't say that about my stepsister, Abe said, smirking. Besides, father is nowhere near finished with her, he said as his dark figure disappeared. Oh, but don't forget, Akatsuki will be appearing soon cause of your till prank earlier, he said as his voice faded. Aru, on the other hand, smirked. Yui had come at her with a blood blade, trying to cut her. He had managed to get her a few times, but it healed much faster than before. Yui cursed slightly and then stopped for a moment. It seems that I'm going to have to step it up a bit, he said as Sasuke had been trying to help, but it was going to happen any time soon as Yui had seemed to put up a dome around the both of them, which prevented him from going in to help her. Nanisher appeared a few moments after Sasuke is last attempted at getting in the dome with brute force. Shit, what the hell, I can't get in, Sasuke cursed as he saw Nanisher appear. You have something to do with this, he said as he grabbed onto Nanashi's collar. No, I swear I do not, he said. Then why does he wear the same family crest as you? Sasuke shouted at him, only to have Naruto appear moments later. Aru, he mumbled as he looked at Sasuke, holding on to Nanisher. He noticed the dome around Aru and Yui. He knew how Yui was. He had met him once before when he was alone. Yui had told him that he would come back to kill Aru one day. Now was probably the time. Shit, he said as he ran Rasengan into the dome, but it didn't seem to matter cause it didn't do anything. Naruto, that won't work? I've tried, Sasuke said. Look, I know we have our differences, but right now, that asshole is more important than our petty fighting, he said right before Naruto was going to yell at him for getting Aru into a big mess again. You won't be able to get in. Only Hitoshi clan members can break through that, Nanashur said, looking at the both of them. Well, get in there. Break it. Sasuke said, I can't. Despite the fact that I am a Hitoshi, it means nothing. I was never taught that skill. He said as he watched Aru getting cut up, though, it just continued to smirk it off. Only Yui knows it, and Abe. He said, rather pissed off. Who the fuck is Abe? Naruto shouted at him as Yui stopped for a moment and smirked. And Anashur, good of you to join in here, he said, as a blood rope seemed to grab hold of him and pull him towards the dome viciously. Though he did not pass through it, he merely stayed at the edge of it, being electrocuted. He screamed in pain as Aru looked up to see him there. Oh look, did you finally notice that he's your little brother? Yui said as Aru got up. You can't do much, can you? You're still a weak, pathetic little girl, worthless just like before. Sasuke and Naruto both looked at each other as they both tired to pull Nanashur off the dome. Get away from him, a voice said. He deserves what he gets. The person said, appearing behind the two of them. Nanashur is nothing but a worthless pawn. Nanashur muttered before screaming in pain once again. Oh, don't worry, brother. I'm sure father will kill her, which means your death also, he states, smirking as Sasuke had summoned Chidori up to attack the newcomer, but only to messing seeing as he did dance step. Shit. He's too fast, Sasuke said as Naruto let go of Nanashur. You get him off the dome. I will deal with Abe, Naruto said as he summoned up a shadow clone. That not gonna work on me, Abe said, smirking as Naruto's clone just looked at the dome. Who said anything about him fighting you? Naruto said, grinning. He's there to assist Aru, he said, smiling as Sasuke was trying to figure out what his former friend meant. They tried to get inside the dome and could not. How is a simple clone going to get in? I'm no simple clone, the other Naruto said as his hair turned blood red, growing claws and whiskers deepening. You, BAA. Sasuke muttered in shock that Naruto was about to separate himself from his demon. Kiki, Uchiha Sasuke, Kyuubi said, looking at him grinning. I'll have to deal with you later, he muttered now. He turned facing the dome, looking directly at Yui, smirking. Oh, how good to see you again, he said evilly as Yui had to stop for a moment to notice Kyuubi standing behind him inside the dome. What? Impossible, Abe said, looking at his father in shock, only to get hit by Naruto. Hey, I'm your opponent, don't ignore me, Naruto said as Abe did step dance in hopes he would get away, but only to be met by Naruto again. Rasengan, Naruto shouted as it impacted with Abe's back, who just disappeared. Another illusion, Sasuke said as Naruto landed next to him. Hero is good at those, Naruto said, looking at the dome, noticing that Aru was no longer herself. Kyuubi, Aru, she's, Naruto started to say as Kyuubi nodded. Yeah, I have to deal with something first. She's fine. Just make sure you knock her out before she goes on a rampage after I realize this dome, Kyuubi said as Sasuke just watched. Nanashur continued to scream as Yui pulled him more towards the dome. And Aru, Nanashur muttered slightly, this all has to be a part of father's plan. Nanashur thought to himself as he screamed. To make them trust me. He continued to think before he passed out, seeing, as he could not take any more pain. Nanashur, Arumumblet, Enoch, she shouted as her seals reappeared on her body, much like Sasuke's curse seal. She preformed step dance along with a jutsu that even Naruto did not know, one that she had not actually known herself until now. Shit, Kyuubi, hurry it up, Naruto shouted at his other clone as Aru appeared between Kyuubi and Yui, only to grab Kyuubi and throw him out of the dome. Get out, she shouted as Naruto's clone that was holding the Kyuubi hit the edge of the dome and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Shit, she's stronger than the clone, Naruto said as he watched her standing there, just grinning. No one should interfere with this, she said sadistically. Yui smirked. Seems like you want to die that badly, he said as Aru stood behind him with her back facing him. Aru, watch out, Naruto shouted as Yui had to finally let Nanashir off the rope in order to have both hands free. I'm going to have to get serious, Yui said as his close friend the doc watched from building. You only have 5 more minutes, Yui, he muttered to a headpiece. Before you wake up, close to Konoha village. Do you think this is going to be a good idea? The kid-like voice said. Yeah. But you remember the last time, he said if he saw you again. The kid voice said, but was interrupted. Don't worry about it. Aru is there to protect me, he said, smirking slightly as the smaller of the two just frowned. The two figures snuck their way into the village only to notice the giant dome in the center of the village. Suki, what's that? The male voice asked, looking at his partner. It's a blood dome. Only 2 people can do that. The little voice said, Yui is here. Fuck. Aru is in danger, he said as he stepped his pace. But what about Na? The other group member was interrupted by the older of the two. I don't care, he shouted as he made his way to the dome, but was on the other side of the thing where Naruto could not see him. Hey, are you? He shouted as the little figure stepped back a bit. Kyo, quiet. Naruto will hear you, Suki said, looking a little worried. Aru heard Kyo's voice and turned her head to look at him. Kyo, she muttered, looking at him slightly, as Yui just smirked. Don't underestimate me, he shouted as Kyo's eyes widened, never having seen Aru like this. I'm going to kill that bastard, Kyo shouted as he saw Naruto on the other side, seeming to argue with another person. That moron, Kyo shouted as he ran to the other side of the dome to hit Naruto in the face. Naruto, how could you let this happen? He shouted as he punched him right in the face. 3 minutes, the doc said as he looked at them, and then at Yui, whose figures seemed to be fading as well as the dome. Damn it, we shall have to continue this later, Yui said, only after stabbing Aru with his blood sword straight in the heart. Though he knew that wouldn't kill her, only wound her for a few days. Finally back in your body, huh, Yui? The doc said, turning his head to the body, laying next to him, slowly getting up. Yui coughed slightly. That technique takes a lot out of me, Yui said as he slowly got up. I didn't expect her to recover so quickly, he said, but it works out. Nakatsu will now be able to infiltrate them easily now, he said, grinning. AKYO, Naruto shouted as he blocked Kyo's attack. What the hell? He shouted as Suki walked over to Aru, who was lying on the ground. Aru, tongue, she said as Aru just smirked and grabbed her by the neck. She said, not really knowing who it was. Chapter 9. Disclaimer, don't know Naruto, only the funny things he does XD. Hitoshi file. The Hitoshi clan is one of uncertainty. It is yet to be determined when this clan appeared. Every generation, the head of the clan has twins. It is yet undetermined why only one of the newborn survives. Since the clan's appearance into the world, they have not made much effort to cooperate with other villages. The whereabouts of this clan are still unknown, though it is said that 5 years ago the clan met an untimely circumstance. One member of the family, a child, is said to have killed many members. Why? That is still unknown. Rumors speculate that this child survived and tagged along with the well-known Silver Flash. Confidential file. Testing is known to have been done on the newest generation of twins. Though only one is known to have survived birth, rumors have mentioned that both children are still alive to date. Only 5 members of the Hitoshi clan are known. Hitoshi Yui, clan leader. Hitoshi Kyo, family position unknown, missing, presumed dead. Hitoshi Suki, related to Kyo, dead. Hitoshi Nakatsu, biological twin son to Yui, has deceased twin. Hitoshi Abe, adoptive son, missing. The rest are still unknown. It is believed that the child that brought the slaughter of the clan is still alive. It appears that the genetic makeup of this clan is much more complicated than they let on. Hitoshi Yui is known to be very aggressive in many ways. In previous meetings that have been mildly documented, it is stated that he does not take any new bit of information into consideration. This may also be why this clan has fallen into extinction. Although many say that the Hitoshi family is still very much alive, not many can say that this particular clan is as well liked as the Uchiha clan. The deceased twin, also known as number 26 in files later found in a cave laboratory only 4 years ago, states that 26 had many biological problems. Though in doctor's notes also recovered, he has stated that this is the evolution of the Hitoshi clan to become more powerful. No scientist was found alive in the cave. One head scientist, also Yui's right-hand man. Body not found. It is presumed that he is still alive, hiding out from 20th wrath. 12 scientists, all deceased. Bodies found mummified, though time of death at time stated they had only been dead for 4 months. No blood in body. Black Flash file. The Black Flash is known to be hiding in the body of a child. Why she is not aged, it is still unknown. It is thought that she hinges her body so that no one knows her true form. Many of the Silver Flash's appearances have been noted, in which his partner in crime has not been anywhere in sight. It has been recorded that most of the killings have been the Black Flash's fault, but Silver Flash has taken the blame. In past years, it is said that the other twin, also known as the Black Flash, is known to be very held back and restrained when around her companion. Though it has been noted that on several occasions, the Black Flash has gone against her companion's wishes and dealt with matters in her own ways. Other members of the Hitoshi clan. Hitoshi Kyo is another known member of the clan, though it is still unknown what his purpose was or if he is actually dead. It has been heard that on occasion Kyo has found his way on the same as the Silver Flash. Recap. AKYO. Naruto shouted as he blocked Kyo's attack. What the hell? He shouted as Suki walked over to Aru, who was lying on the ground. Aru, tan, she said as Aru just smirked and grabbed her by the neck. Hida, she said, not really knowing who it was. End recap. Aru, you're... Suki said, trying to breath. Hurting me, she said as her eyes went red. Also, Aru, I don't want to hurt you, Suki said rudely as both Kyo and Naruto has noticed what was going on. Crap. Those two have to stay away from each other. Kyo said, last time was hard enough when they got like this. Naruto finished. Sasuke just looked at the two of them as Aru didn't seem to want to respond to what Suki had said. This fight isn't over Tsukushi, Aru said, grinning. I'm not letting them interfere this time, she said as the blood dome went back up. What? Naruto said, really shocked, never having seen Aru use this technique before. Suki, enough, Kyo shouted as Suki grabbed onto Aru's arm, pulling her off to let her go. Not this time, Kyo, she said as she moved back a moment. Poor Sasuke, he's going to get stuck in the middle. He's inside the dome. I'm going to be a meanie. Sasuke at the moment hadn't noticed that he was going to get caught into this fight. The moment he noticed was when the surroundings around him became red. Oh, what? He said, looking around him as he saw the look on Naruto's face. Stay out of her path, Naruto shouted before his voice disappeared. Suki smirked as she was able to get Aru's grip off of her. You're not Aru, she said, looking at her opponent. She might have been a little girl, but she packed a punch, so she wasn't about to let Aru kick her butt. You're, Nan, she was about to say as she noticed that someone else was in the dome when Aru turned her head for a moment to look at the extra person. Lovely, Aru said sarcastically. This is going to be fun, she said as she appeared right in front of Sasuke, grinning. You're not supposed to be here, Kek, she said evilly. You really shouldn't be here, she said as Suki was about to help him out, but was held back by a shield cutting the dome in half. Don't interrupt, Tsukushi, she said. It's his own fault, she said as she stepped closer to Sasuke, who tried to step back only to hit the edge of the dome. Damn it, he thought as Suki seemed to be trying to get to his aid. Whatever you do, don't let her touch you, she shouted as Sasuke looked at the person and grunted. It's a little late to say that, he thought as he wanted to shout back. Aru grinned at him. You're cute. Maybe I won't eat you, she said, grinning as she grabbed his cloths and pulled him off the dome. Why are you so scared? I don't bite, she told him, smiling. Not much anyway, She whispered in his ear as she scratched his chest with her nails when she ripped through his cloths, drawing blood. He flinched slightly, feeling his muscles tighten. Sasuke started to realize that he couldn't move at all. He thought to himself, "What the hell did this freak do to me?" Aru began to smirk evilly as she tightened her grip on his clothes. "Come here, little Uchiha. Let me show you how much I find you eatable." She brought him close into a deep and rough kiss, causing his lips to bleed slightly. She licked his lips, causing him to flinch. "You standing there is starting to bore me. I think I'll have you on the ground." With that, she threw the Uchiha to the cold floor. She leaned over Sasuke, her soft breasts wrapped neatly in her battle kimono, touching his left pectoral muscle, as she whispered with the same flicker of tongue that one might compare with that of a cobra, deadly and venomous. He couldn't move, but he could still feel his pulse, his blood pooling unwillingly into his loins. "Don't worry. This won't hurt." Much a feral sound produced from her throat into what Sasuke heard as a manically, even seductive giggle. He wasn't quite sure what to think of this new Aru who was pinning him helpless to the ground as she puppeteered his body with sickening ease. Besides, the first 3 hours will be the worst. Sasuke tried to squirm, but he realized that he was still paralyzed. Cursing his bad luck, he was now at the mercy of Aru. Then he thought, will she be merciful? He was about to find out that she slowly moved her hand towards his crotch while she shredded his cloths in the process with her nails. What was making the situation even worse was that her actions were slowly arousing Sasuke. "I would appreciate it if you would cease with what you're doing." She began to giggle sadistically and then lick her lips. You seem to be enjoying this," she whispered as she was twirling her middle finger around the tip of his crotch. "So, tell me, is your brother bigger than you or the other way around?" Sasuke glared at her question and then managed to jerk his body slightly, causing her to fall off. "Not that it's any of your business. Why don't you find out for yourself?" Aru raised an eyebrow at him as she got back up. That wasn't very nice of you." Moving her hands ever so slightly, performing the correct hand seals, she smirked devilishly. "Blood arts, technique of devil's bind." Sasuke felt no pain, but he seemed to be physically merged to the ground. "What the fuck did you do?" Aru just looked at him and began to laugh hysterically at him. "Oh, nothing. Just making sure I can have my way with you without any interruptions." She looked down at his crotch and realized his arousal was gone. "You're no fun. You would think with all this torture I'm putting you through, you would keep that nice-looking hard-on in your pants for me," she said as she walked towards him, kneeling down slowly as she put her thigh in between his legs, rubbing up against his crotch. She leaned down toward his chest, swirling circles around his left nipple with her tongue. Sasuke let out a low groan, not being able to control the blood flow that was quickly moving back down toward his cock. "I didn't say you could molest me again." He was at loss for words and truly had no control over the situation. Unfortunately, he couldn't help but enjoy Aru's torture tactics. Aru smiled as she felt Sasuke's hard-on return from the dead. "Who said you were giving me permission?" She began to tease the other nipple with her fingertips. "Besides, I want to thank you properly for trying to save me." Sasuke stopped to think for a second and then realized he might as well go with the flow. It was better than having Orochimaru pawing at his body. "Well, I guess I have no choice. Do with me what you will." Aru moved downwards, removing his pants and released Sasuke's 7-inch cock. "I will, and I will enjoy it. I could care less about you." She grabbed the base of his member and placed her head towards the tip. "Besides, I can see why they call you a prodigy, Uchiha Sasuke." Unedited Chapter 9. Disclaimer: don't own the Naruto characters, only Aru, and the new characters that are posted. Aru smirked as she lay on top of Sasuke. "This is going to be fun," she said, smiling. Sasuke just watched her as he tried to struggle out of her hold, but couldn't make a move. She had a rather tight grip on him. "Don't struggle, Sasuke-chan. It will only hurt you more," she said as Suki watched in horror. "Hold on," she shouted as she looked around, trying to get in Aru's new bubble. As she looked around, she noticed that she couldn't see outside the dome. "Damn it, Aru," she shouted as she banged on the dome as if it was a wall. Aru just looked behind her and smirked. Oh, you're still here, she said, rather surprised, as if she had forgotten about Suki. Gore. Suki grunted slightly as she looked at her niece. Aru may have been older than her, but not many people knew that the Hitoshi clan actually existed in other countries. One clan had separated into two, much like the Hyuga clan, but with only slightly differences. Suki may have had the seals, only just mildly. She wasn't rely on her seals to fight, unlike Aru. It was different. Kyo had told her about his brother, that he was a bloodthirsty human that wanted only power, and he would get it no matter how many people he would hurt. Not even his own children. Suki watched in horror, knowing full well that that was not Aru. Give Aru back, she shouted at the Aru imposter. Whatever are you talking about? She said as she stopped for a moment, getting off Sasuke, and then walking over towards Suki, making an opening for her to walk through. I am Hitoshi Aru, she said, smirking evilly. Well, in a way, she continued, smirking at Suki as she was trying to tease with her mind. You can't fool me. I know you're not Aru-chan, Suki said as the seals started to cover her own body. Oh, looky here. You're so weak, Aru said as she grabbed onto Suki's neck, not giving her enough time to block her attack. Aru just smirked and then watched Suki struggle slightly. You're just weak. You would rather hide who you are, she told Suki as she gripped hard before ripping Suki's front shirt, finding her main seal. You would best find a way to hide this, she told her. She grabbed it tightly. Suki screamed slightly. Huh, how did she know about that? Suki thought before passing out. On some of the clan members, it was in their best interesting that they hide their main seal. Much like Aru's being on her back near the bottom, no one knew, seeing as her body made May seals, including another main one on her shoulder. It's so good to be out again, she said, smirking. Last time I was out was when I killed those scientists, she said as Suki had begun to pass out. No worries though. I'm going to have my fun with Sasuke first, she said. Suki at this point had passed out as Aru just threw her out of the dome. Kyo and Naruto, waiting on the outside, watched in horror as they were able to see part of the dome again. They watched as Suki got thrown out as Kyo caught her. Suki, he shouted, hang in there. He continued to shout it as Naruto had tried to get in the dome at the same time. Aru looked at him, then smirked, seeing as soon he touched the dome, he was electrocuted. Sorry, Naruto-chan, but I have other things to take care of, she said. It's my turn to play, she said as Naruto slowly got back up, not really understanding what she went by it. The dome became dark again as she walked over to Sasuke, seeing he had managed to get himself free. I'm amused, she told him as she walked back towards him as he started to form Chidori. Come on, Sasuke. That won't work on me, she told him. I don't care. As long as you stay away from me, he told her as he ran straight for her, although it was more like slowly walking, seeing as he was barely able to move his body. She let him get close enough to her to think that he was about to hit her, only to grab his arm, flip him, and to sit on top of his belly. Sasuke, 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 she said, rather disappointed. I thought I told you, Aru isn't here, she said, smirking. She wanted to kill you. I haven't even made such an effort, she told him, smirking as she shifted slightly, only to straddle him once again, just as before. Trust me, if I wanted you dead, you would be. I'm not a softie like her, she said, leaning down. He looked at her confused. Why was she talking about herself in a third person? He couldn't understand that Aru had two personalities. In truth, he barely knew her, although Naruto had never met this Aru. She had only been there for a second before the current Aru had taken back control of her body. Aru doesn't like to have too much conflict, and she's really just a weak little girl, she said, grinning. I just want to play with you. And you just seem to want to hurt me, she said, smirking. That's fine. I have my ways, she said as she flipped him so that he would be on top of her. The dome slowly started to disappear as Sasuke was now on top of her, still confused. What? He hadn't realized that she had released the dome as he was on top, making it seem like he was taking advantage of her. I wonder what Naruto will say when he sees you on top of me, she said, smirking at Sasuke, who had now finally realized what was going on. What the fuck? He said to himself as he could barely move. It seemed that she is able to control his body only slight, seeing as he had control of a few body parts. The dome started to clear as Naruto managed to get in only to see Sasuke on top of Aru, who was acting rather scared. "Get another one," she shouted as she looked over with tears in her eyes. Sasuke looked over and saw Naruto almost blue blood vessel. Sasuke lost his balance and fell top of her, gripping her chest slightly as he tried to catch himself from falling on to hear Aru giggling evilly under her breath. "Naruto will never forgive you," she whispered as Sasuke looked over at Naruto, who was preparing Rasengan to blow Sasuke to Kingdom Come. "Hold on," Kyo said as he got up, holding on his Suki and giving Aru a glare. "Kid, I suggest you get out of here," he said to Sasuke. He slowly got up, but just barely as Kyo was holding Naruto back with Blood Whip. "Aru," he started, but couldn't finish as he felt Suki flinch in pain. Aru had slowly begun to get up as she ran over to Naruto and hid behind him. "Naruto-chan," she said, sniffling slightly as she was also smirking slightly behind his back. Naruto released Rasengan and then turned around to look at Aru to see if she was okay. He checked her up and down and then glared at Kyo. "Kyo, you had no right to do that," he shouted as he henjied Aru into a child. Though for some reason she looked a lot different in her child form, her hair was in a slight ponytail with more of her body showing. Naruto didn't seem to care at that point as he picked her up and held her. "We're going home," he said as Kyo looked at Aru suspiciously. Naruto left as Kyo was making sure that Suki was okay before he decided to find a place to stay. But before he could do that, Sasuke had reappeared fully dressed, though still not having full control of his body. "Thanks," he said as he looked at Kyo, who had his back turned. "I didn't do what you saw," he said, looking at Kyo, who nodded. "Don't worry, I believe you," he said. "Why do you think I held that baka back?" he said, smirking as he turned around, holding Suki in his arms. "She tried her best," he said, smiling. "But that Aru, I better make sure I watch her," Kyo muttered under his breath as Sasuke looked at him. "She was different. I thought she didn't know how to do that stuff," he said as Kyo just smirked. "She shouldn't be able to," he said as he looked over at Nanushir and smirked. "At least one of them is fine," he thought to himself as he walked over to him. Now I have to find a place to stay and have a chat with my nephew. When he wakes up," Kyo said as Sasuke looked at him confused. "Haha, I forgot to introduce myself. Things got really odd," he said. "Itoshi Kyo is the name," he said. "I'm Aru's uncle," he told him in a way. He told Sasuke, who was looking at him confused. As Kyo only looked like he was in early 20s, how could be her uncle? "I'm a clone of the original. Suki here is also a clone," he said, smiling. "All right, then what about him?" Sasuke asked, looking at Nanushir. "Well, you see, Nanushir, I don't know much about him. I only met Aru and Naruto about a one ago, when she went on a rampage through the village I was staying in. It wasn't pretty," he told him, smirking. Naruto managed to calm her down. He said as Suki began to wake up. "Oh, Nanny," she said, looking around, not remember what had happened. "Kyo-chan," she said, looking at him, rather confused. "I'm glad you're okay, Suki," he said as Sasuke noticed that all her wounds had healed, along with Nanashi's as well. Sasuke grabbed Nanashi's arm and pulled him up. "You can stay in my place for a while," he said. "It's thanks for helping out back there," he said as he carried Nanushir on his back. "It's this way," he said as he began to walk down the main street. Kyo looked at Sasuke and smirked. "Looks like we have a free place to stay tonight, Tusky," he whispered with a victory smirk on his face. Naruto, on the other hand, wasn't too pleased about the events that had happened only moments ago. "Aru, what were you thinking?" he shouted at her as her eyes began to water up. She started as she began to cry. "I'm sorry," she shouted at him, though it was still the dominant Aru in control. She wasn't about to give up this for a lifetime. She liked being in control. Though she hated being a child around him as the dispelled the jutsu, Naruto looked so confused when it happened. That wasn't supposed to happen. He thought to himself, knowing that he made sure this time to make the Henji much stronger than the last time. This childish body. Moments later, she surpassed Naruto's Henji and became an adult again in his arms. Aru looked at him with rather fake watery eyes and began to cry again. Sasuke. Saki tried to take advantage of me, she said, clinging on to him. She wanted the two of them against each other, just to make it more amusing for her little game. Naruto clenched his fist and then looked down at her. You don't leave my sight ever again, he stated, looking at her with a rather pissed-off expression. Kyo, Suki, Sasuke, and a still unconscious Nanushir made it back to Sasuke's mansion safely as both Kyo and Suki looked around. Wow, this is a really big place for one person to live alone, Suki said as Sasuke just looked back at her and didn't really respond to it all. Nanushir had slowly began to wake up as he noticed that he was inside a house now. Jumping out of Sasuke's help, he looked at everyone rather worried. He said, looking to see Sasuke, along with two people he had never met before. Where am I? He asked, looking at Sasuke, who gave him an odd look. What is it with this clan? He muttered. You can't even remember what happened to you at your own fight, he shouted at Nanushir, who looked confused at him. No, I remember. I got my ass royally served, he said as he rubbed his arm, looking around to see Sasuke's home and then Kyo and Suki. Cool. You got servants, he said, rather excited. Only to be hit by the wrath of Tusky, it being a giant fan across the back of the head. Suki, that was rude, Kyo said, holding back his laughter as Nanushir held his head tightly. Sasuke had managed to make them follow him to the living room. Again, thanks for helping me, he said as he sat down. She just went weird after the first battle, Sasuke said as Nanushir listened. Like crazy and more, I'm going to kill you, kind of crazy, Nanushir asked, looking at him. What? Replied Sasuke as Suki had found a place to sit on Kyo's lap. Kyo looked at the both of them and sighed. Look, it is apparently that Aru is hiding who she really is from Naruto. She chose to release her true colors earlier today. Might I add they aren't pretty? Kyo started. I've known her to just plain be absent in her fighting, but from what I saw before it went dark with you, Sasuke. She wasn't fighting on instinct, he said as Sasuke nodded. Nanushir, who had found himself sitting across from Sasuke, found it a bit awkward. If what you're describing is true, Nanushir began, then she's back, he muttered, rather scared. The three other observers in the room watched Nanushir as he started to get scared. She isn't nice, she loves blood, will do anything to get what she wants, Nanushir said as she stopped before having said enough. He didn't want them to find out who he was outside his real features. Kyo looked at him and knew that his nephew was holding something back from them, but he wasn't about to rip it out of him to tell him. He would tell them when he was good and ready. That was Kyo's motto. Sasuke began to talk again, and Nanushir seemed to zone out the entire time they were talking. Flashback. Nakatsu hid behind a tree as men with a similar emblem that was on his shoulder. Nakatsu watched as men carefully made their way towards the cave. He signaled them slightly as most of them moved forward. 26, aka Aru, stood there smiling at them. Are you seriously going to try this? She asked, watching them. You're not fast enough for me, she continued as she appeared in front of one of the Hitoshi Umbu. He couldn't believe that she was 10x faster than him. What the? Before he was even able to finish his sentence, he was spilling blood on the floor from his neck. You're not even fast enough to stay caught up to me, she said, smiling. It seemed that back then Aru's other side had a more sadistic way of killing her victims. She smiled at them as if she was an innocent child, be then only to trick them into their own death. The Umbu member dropped to the floor as Nakatsu watched in horror. She was his age, only 13. How was she even able to do that? At the time, he didn't understand. He could see that her seals were covering most of her body, but around her shoulder as well as her back. Peekaboo, she said as she laid her head on his shoulder. Nakatsu didn't even have enough time to react before she grabbed him and threw him to the ground. She watched as he moved back slightly and then grinned. What's wrong, brother? Are you scared? She asked as her blood sword formed in her hand. Hee. You're not even strong enough to fight me, she continued as he got back up slowly. He had to defend himself, no matter what. He couldn't let her pass here. When he saw her former blood sword, he stepped back slightly. Shit, I don't know that yet, he thought to himself as he couldn't believe, more like not be able to understand how she was able to do techniques like that at her age. Though it could also be because she had just killed about 5 scientists and another 10 Hitoshi A and BU before getting to him. "What's the matter, Nakatsu?" she asked, looking at him, smirking as she got closer. "You said your little friend isn't here to help you out," she asked as she looked around him. "Or maybe he is just hiding." He slowly got back up as she walked closer to him and tried to act as if nothing was wrong, but he knew that he couldn't take her. His father had spent most of his son's life making sure that he was strong enough to fight anyone, and he thought he was, but it seemed that someone was much more powerful than his current state. He was barely able to family techniques as powerful as that. He clenched his fist as 26 appeared in front of him, cutting him on his forearm slightly, just smiling. Lucky for him, she didn't know where his main seal was located. Nakatsu moved back slowly as his arm started to shake. He didn't even have enough time to react before 26 attacked him yet again. She wasn't about to give him any chances to attack her, even if she had to kill him. Yui watched from afar, rather pissed off, even with all the training that he had put his son through and not as enough training for 26. She was still more powerful. 26 was about to stab Nakatsu and kill him when she noticed another's presence. "Oh, I should be honored," she said, smirking as she dropped Nakatsu, who was now barely awake. I figured that he had more training than you," Yui said, jumping down. Keep in mind that 26, Aru, was only 13 at this time, and Yui, to her, was a lot stronger than he was in his current state. She grinned slightly as Yui seemed to disappear. "Step dance. You're not going to get me with that," she said as she was about to do her own when Yui appeared behind her. "I believe that I just have," he spoke calmly as he grabbed 26 by her left shoulder where one of her main seals resided. "I have watched you develop. I know where you're weak." 26 widened her blood-red eye as she screamed in pain before her head dropped to the ground. She had managed to cut Yui rather badly before he had gotten to her. Nakatsu was getting up slowly when he saw his father having a hold of his twin. He slowly made his way towards them, as all he could see on his twin's face was sadistic smirk. The seals on her shoulder seemed to disappear as the fresh blood that was currently dripping on her shoulder ran down her back, more like had begun being sucked in by her other seal. "You hurt her," she said quietly, barely able to be heard. "She's in pain." She continued to mumble as Nakatsu began to notice that something was wrong with her. "Father," he was about to shout, but was rather late as 26 had dug her blade on his right side rather hard, cutting him deeply as the blade began to get bigger as more blood seemed to cover her. Yui flinched in pain as he managed to get away from her, but not in time. 26 grinned as she watched the blood drip from her hand. "It's so red. I like it," she mumbled. She continued as if on K the doc's underlings appeared at the scene. They looked at her and then started to get scared, having noticed that she wasn't unconscious like they had first presumed. 26 smirked as she turned to see them. "Hello," she said politely, getting a big grin on her face. "You're all going to die here," she said. That was the last thing Nakatsu could remember before someone had knocked him out. Yes, he had managed to escape, but it hadn't been by choice. Yui must have had something planned up the whole time, although at the time he didn't mistrust his father as much as he did now. In a flashback, Nanisher looked down at the floor in a daze as he remembered what had happened a few years ago. He looked at his arms as he lifted the shirt to see the scars that had been left on from that day. Those ones hadn't healed like the rest, much like his current on, where he had been cut on his back. Suki had noticed Nanashi's sudden quietness and then poked Kyo-chan, she whispered as she looked up at him. "He's acting stranger," she said as Kyo just nodded, probably something to do with the past. He said as Sasuke had gone to grab some tea for them to drink. "So Nanisher, you're related to the Hitoshi main branch, huh?" Kyo asked as Nanisher seemed to snap out of it. Iyawi," he replied, not really wanting to answer the question. "In a way, you either are or you're like us," Kyo replied, a little angry at the answer he had gotten from Nanisher. He was just about to answer Kyo's question when Sasuke heard a knock on his door. Sasuke stared at his door as Suki looked at him. "Aren't you going to answer it?" she asked, looking back at the door and then at him. "No, it's Sakura," he replied as Nanashur heard, "Hide me." He wanted to shout out, but ended up getting up. "I think I've overstayed my welcome," he said as he was about to leave as Sasuke grabbed his shoulder. "Oh no, you don't," he said, glaring at him. "You still need to answer my questions, and she's only here because of you," he muttered. Elsewhere in the village, Naruto looked at Aru to see if she was alright, only to find a few small marks on her. "Oh, it's so good to be out," she thought to herself as Naruto's eyes widened. "Did you get cut on your shoulder?" he asked as Aru looked at him. I think so." She lay sweetly looking at him. Naruto had noticed that something was different with her, but really could his finger on it. Aru grinned under her breath as Naruto seemed to patch her wounds up. "You usually heal," he said as he continued to patch her up. She looked at him, but didn't really have an answer for that. She may have been the more dominante of the two personalities, but this Aru couldn't control techniques she had never learned. Cursing herself, she just looked innocently at Naruto and began to cry, only to stop a few seconds later. She gripped her chest slightly as she began to mumble something. "Stop trying to get in my head," she mumbled as Naruto just watched her confused. "Aru, are you all right?" he asked as he walked up to her and then watched her. Aru looked at him after she had regained control of the body and smiled. "I'm fine. I just gotta chill," she said, looking at him all cute. "Come on, we better to Tsunade, see if she found out anything new," Naruto said, "and maybe we can find someone to heal your wounds." He continued as he picked her up and then started to carry her. In the Konoha forest, Hiro smirked as he looked at Abe. "Hey, aren't you excited about being here?" he asked, looking at Abe, who just gave him a bored look. "Explain to me why we're here again?" Abe asked as Hiro grinned. "We're going to be tricking Akatsuki into thinking we're good guys and that we are after them because that Silver Flash sent us." Abe just gave him a stupid look. "Are you serious? Do you really think that Akatsuki are that stupid?" he asked, looking at him and shaking his head. "Why do I always get stuck with the stupid partners?" Abe asked himself as Hiro just gave him a dirty look. "I never had this problem with Nakatsu," Hiro thought to himself as he was ready to beat the living shit out of Abe. Hiro just changed the way that the landscape looked as Abe, being younger and never actually having partnered with Hiro, didn't really know what Hiro's powers were. Hiro smirked as they went from a forest to a dark cave to on top of Konoha Mountain. He smirked as he watched Abe's face change. "Dude, this is so awesome," he said, looking at Hiro, who was now more concentrated in keeping this illusion running. "Listen, this is how it's going to go. I'm going to make you look like Aru." Hiro began as Abe, upon hearing her name, snapped at him. "How dare you do such a thing to me?" He shouted at Hiro as he had already changed Abe's appearance to Aru's adult form. "Relax. You're not able to use her powers. Nakatsu is able to use them, seeing as he knows what they are." He said, "My powers works with the mind. If you know how to do a special technique, my power amplifies it by 10 folds, making it super powerful," he said as Abe gave him an odd look. "What's the catch?" he asked as Hiro looked rather offended by all this. "No catch." He lied. In truth, Hiro sucked a bit of a user's life force the more he stayed in the illusion. It worked out well for Hiro, but never for his users. At first, he had started this as a game when he had been younger. He had been orphaned at a young age after his powers became too powerful. Up until now, he had killed 5 of his users, this all before having met Yui. Backflash. Yui looked at a 6-year-old Hiro and smirked as he watched the boy suck the life out of his then best friend. At the time, Hiro had thought of this as if it was only a game, but soon he learned that his power was more than that. Hiro followed after Yui after he had told him that he could find him someone that wouldn't die whenever he used his ability. It was then that Yui introduced him to Nakatsu, and it was from then when Nakatsu had a fake form. Though seeing as Nakatsu sucked life out of others for his own life, Hiro could just steal his from Nakatsu. At that time, Nakatsu had been thought to kill anyone that got in his way, but the more he learned about his father's true intentions, he started to slow down. Hiro, on the other hand, would let Yui know about everything Nakatsu did. Hiro had grown to like Nakatsu more than a friend should the older he grew. Nakatsu looked at Hiro sitting in a tree as he was making food, "Nay, hero, why did you decide to join my father?" Nakatsu asked as he continued to cook his food. "To find my perfect host," Hiro replied bluntly as he jumped down from his tree smirking. Nakatsu hadn't fully heard him as he wanted to get Hiro to repeat his answer, but Hiro had interrupted him. "So, what for dinner?" "Oh, and not rabbit again," Hiro said, slucking slightly as Nakatsu just laughed slightly. "Only thing I could catch," he said, pushing Hiro aside. "Stop complaining. If you wanted something better, you should have gone to catch it yourself." Nakatsu replied, rather angry. Hiro just smirked as he grabbed a piece of the food that Nakatsu had just finished making and made it appear as something completely different. Nakatsu frowned as he watched his friend eating better food. He turned around glaring behind him, pissed off. It always seemed to happen like that. Nakatsu would do something Hiro didn't like, so he would just make it better. It was just how things worked with the two of them. In a flashback, Hiro was now with Abe, which to him he didn't prefer, but it wasn't his problem. Yui knew what he did to his partners, but he seems to want to give him ones that weren't able to stand his ability. Shrugging it off, he watched Abe figure around the campground they had made as if something was bothering. Hiro, for one, wasn't the kind of person to ask what was wrong with anyone, so he didn't. As if on cue, one of Hiro's subordinates had appeared out of nowhere and told him something quietly enough so that Abe didn't hear what he had said. Hiro smirked and then nodded as the person had left. "Oh, who was that?" Abe asked as Hiro continued to smirk. "Oh, no one. Just something to tell me that my plan is in motion." He said, "Now, this is where you come in." He continued grinning as if there was no tomorrow. Back at the village, Aru's other personality seemed to be having trouble keeping her control over her body. Naruto watched her to make sure that she was all right, but he was always a little out of it when it came to Aru. Since the day he had met her, he had never accepted her to turn out the way she did. She started off not talking. Well, she still didn't talk much. Although she had opened up more, she would tell him more now. Or just plain out do it without his consent. Well, it wasn't that she really needed it from him. Naruto sighed slightly as he watched Aru more carefully. He still hadn't noticed that Aru wasn't herself. They were both now waiting in Tsunade's office for her to appear. Moments later, she walked into her office looking at the two of them. She had noticed right away that Aru didn't seem like herself, but wasn't about to mention it until she knew the whole story. She had been briefed on what had happened in the middle of the village only hours beforehand. "Naruto, explain to me what happened about an hour ago," she asked, looking at him. He began to tell her who and what had showed up as she began to frown deeply. He stopped for a moment and then looked at Aru. Then, the dome came back, sealing Aru, Sasuke, and Suki inside. He continued telling her that he couldn't see inside. Coming close to the end of the story, he pounded his fist down on the table. "Sasuke is just like Orochimaru," he shouted. He tried to take advantage of Aru while she couldn't control her body. He shouted as Tsunade noticed the sudden change of vibe from Aru, who was just sitting there in her adult form. Tsunade stood up and then got a file from her pile on another desk and then threw it at Naruto. "Read that," she said, making sure she watched Aru's reaction to this information. Naruto read it, but sadly couldn't understand it as he looked back at Tsunade. "What's this all supposed to mean?" he asked as Tsunade smirked and then began to explain. "Around the time that you disappeared, Jiraiya went searching for you. He didn't stop," she told him. "He looked for you everywhere. We both knew that you weren't dead. Despite his efforts, he couldn't seem to find you. Until one day, he found you." She stopped to see Naruto's reaction. Naruto's emotions took the best of him as he glared at his former Hokage. He didn't follow her rule anymore. The only reason he was there was because Aru needed her help. She was the best doctor he had ever known. "He saw you were all right. You were in the village of Mist with Aru, but at the time he didn't know who she was. He was going to approach you." She continued as Naruto cut her off. "And why didn't he?" he shouted back, angry. She knew he would react like that. Therefore, she didn't get angry. "It seems that even if you protect your little friend here, she protects you more than you really know," she said, looking at Aru, who clenched her fist tightly. "Jiraiya almost died seeing you. She wouldn't allow him near you." Tsunade continued as Naruto went from angry to shocked. Aru made him stop," he replied. Ha ha. Tsunade, you're making it sound worse than it was. Jiraiya's voice came from the window as he jumped into the office. It's not that she wouldn't allow me close to you. She thought I was a treat, he said as he saw Aru sitting there. Oh, I see you are in your adult form this time, huh? He asked, looking at her as she glared at him. Still have change, huh? He asked, smirking slightly. Listen, Naruto, I stopped my search because I saw who you were with. She. Well, do I put this? She's worse than. Jiraiya couldn't finish that sentence as Aru got up. This doesn't concern me, she said. If it isn't about my seals, then I do not need to be here. She talked probably for the first time in a while. Naruto looked at her and then looked back at Jiraiya. You stopped searching for me because to you, I was perfectly safe. Naruto shouted as Jiraiya nodded. Yes, I have encountered a Hitoshi before. He stopped watching her. Sit down, little one, he said, appearing in front of her. You know you can't take me. Aru muttered softly as Jiraiya laughed. Yes, I know, but do you think that you can take me out in here, little one? He asked as she looked back at Naruto and then sat back down pissed off. Aru's kinder side may have been sleeping at that moment, but this Aru couldn't afford her cover being blown now. Naruto watched her sit back down as Jiraiya continued his story. I found you in mist. You had gone off to get some food. At the time, I had no idea that you were being accompanied by anyone. So I went into your room to find Aru sound asleep. While I thought that she was asleep, she got up while I was searching through your things to make sure that you were fine. I guess she thought that I was one of the bad men you had told her about, because it was kill first, ask question later with her. He said, scratching his head. You would think she would have a different look on things if you were with it, but luckily, I noticed her seals in time to get out of her attack. He said, looking at Aru. Do you remember, little one? He asked as she sat there quietly. That's why our room was such a mess. I thought you got bored, he said, looking at Aru, who didn't really respond to either question. Aru looked at Naruto and was thinking of different ways to kill him. She didn't like him, probably because her other self. She gave Jiraiya a dirty look and then got up. You deserved it, she said, looking at him. You should not have been there. If you wanted to help Naruto, you should have appeared while he was there, not when he was gone to check how he was doing, she told him. It was probably the first clue that Aru was not her normal self. She used Naruto's whole name. She talked more than she usually did. And thirdly, she started as she stood up and looked at him. How was I to know you weren't some kind of pedophile? Jiraiya just looked at her and gave her a mean glare. I'm not a pedophile. He shouted back at her as his face was turning red. Yes, I may be a perv, but I'm no pedophile. Cut me some slack, I have my limits. Tsunade, Naruto, and Aru all looked at him as he tried to explain as to why he had been in the room in the first place. Aru just looked at him and smirked. Yeah, sure you do, pedophile. Naruto watched Aru's reaction to everything. He may have been slow, but he wasn't that slow. He noticed that she wasn't the same. All since the fight with her own father, Yui. The conversation continued like that for a good 30 minutes or so as the scene changed back to Sasuke's home. Sakura continued to knock on his door as Nanisher watched them. Come on, are you seriously trying to kill me? He asked Sasuke. He just smirked as he looked at Nanisher. As long as she's off my back, I really do not care, he told him. Kyo and Suki just laughed slightly. Come on, little Hitoshi spawn. She can't be that awful, Kyo said as Sasuke was about to laugh but held it in. Hiro, on the other hand, watched Abe, who was looking at his new body. Do I seriously have to look like her? He asked as Hiro just laughed. No, but I'm making you, because otherwise you wouldn't agree to it at all, Hiro said as he jumped down from a tree that he had been sitting in. All right, it's time to start this. My plan is already start. Our guest should be here any second. Hiro was right. Kisame and Itachi had been following his little well-planned trap all along. Kisame walked alongside Itachi as scoffed slightly. Yar. I don't get why Pain-sama insists that we find this stupid girl. What power could some 16-year-old chick really have that could be more powerful than my Samahada? Itachi blinked and looked towards his partner apathetically. Our job is to carry out Leader Sama orders, not to question them, and if you paid attention to his instructions, you know exactly what great powers, he emphasized, he was talking about. Suddenly, the pair criminals froze in silence. A sharp whizzing sound cut through the canopy of the forest. Then cloaked shinobi divided as several kunai struck the floor of the thicket where they had stood barely milliseconds before. Itachi produced several of his own kunai from his cloak sleeves, as Kisame removed his samahara from his back. They stood, still massed in silence amongst the leafy branches of the trees, waiting and watching for their attackers to appear. It was all working to Hiro's plan. He stood behind some trees as he watched. He wore his own clan's logo on his cloths. Unlike the Hitoshi clan, his was different. Hiro had somewhat of a boyish appearance. His hair was short and brown, with long strands of blonde in certain parts of his hair. Hiro watched Fakeru making her appearance as he smiled. "I kinda wish that was me," Hiro said to himself as he watched his master plan spring into action. A young woman with long flowing black hair appeared from the underbrush, her pink eyes glinting in the faint shimmer of the sun through the treetops. Her layered kimono blew lightly in the breeze as she fixed her gaze to the branches that concealed her targets. A man full-wed suit behind her, Kisame's face split into a homicidal grin from ear to ear. So, the prey has come to the predator. What luck! End of chapter. Cliffhanger. Okay, so thus another end to another chapter, and I'm sorry again for the long wait. Introduction of Kisame and Itachi. Chapter 10, unedited. The wind howled through the woods, tearing the leaves from their branches as it whipped about the trees wildly. The early evening stretched across the clouded sky. The giant cumulonimbus clouds gave little way for the dying sun's rays to grace the surrounding area, before falling into complete darkness. A young woman sat among the trees, her vision sweeping over the land repeatedly as she began to familiarize herself with her surroundings. Wicked violet eyes danced about the blades of grass, combing through the branched, threatening to slice through anything they set upon. Silken locks of ebony and electric purple blew violently in the strong gusts of the north wind and stopped and settled about her back and shoulders, reaching down to her navel, only to be picked back up again as the winds rattle through the forest. Deep shades of gray and lavender frosted her eyelids, accenting long black eyelashes. Her paled olive skin shimmering with the occasional kiss of the setting sun, appearing dreamlike, though nearly lifeless in the fading light. Alone, sitting among the branches, she waited. She began smoothing out her black silk robes, a cat-like thunder beast embroidered with fine silver fibers into the left side. Her left hand was placed upon the tree's trunk to keep her steady, while her right hand twirled the silver necklace she wore lazily around her index finger. The sound wasn't audible from the forceful gusts, and thus made no real sound in comparison. It had been a full 8 months now that she had left her ruined home, in escape from the frightful forces of Akatsuki. Left to fend for herself, she'd traveled far from home, seeking to erase the vivid memoirs of her parents' brutal slaughter at the hands of their treacherous mercenaries. The tip of her tongue passed over her lips, as if she could taste the air, savoring what was to come. Time to drag your tongue across the sugar cube and hope you get a taste.